The last thing I felt in my first life was the cold. Not the apocalypse cold, that kind I'd learned to live with for 3 months. This was a smaller, more personal cold, the kind that comes off a knife when it slides into the one spot on your body that isn't supposed to have a knife in it, right below the navel. The sea of elixir, we called it back then, the little furnace where a superpower lives. Put out that furnace and everything above it just stops being a person. And the worst part? I knew both hands on the knife. Lin Shan, my brother. Not by blood, by 10 years of eating from the same pot, sharing the same tent, watching each other's backs through a world that had turned into one long white grave. He'd frozen my legs to the ground first, real considerate of him, so I couldn't even fall over with dignity. Ice element. I was the one who taught him how to use it. And behind him, holding her phone up to film it because of course she was, my girlfriend. Chen Jing. The woman I'd survived 3 months of the end of the world for. "Aw, don't look at me like that," she said, and she actually pouted. "We kept you around as long as you were useful." A dog that fetches supplies is a good dog, but the dog's tired now. She crouched down to my level so I'd hear her clearly over my own body shutting down. "So be a good boy and die." I wanted to say something devastating, something a hero says. What I actually croaked out, with the last air I had, was, "Adulterous couple, I'll come back as a ghost and haunt you into an early." And then the white swallowed everything. "Grave." I finished the sentence. I heard myself finish it, which was strange, because I distinctly remembered running out of both the sentence and the being alive about 1 second earlier. I opened my eyes and immediately regretted it because I was staring at a ceiling, a clean ceiling, a dry ceiling with no icicles hanging off it like the fangs of something that wanted to eat me. Warm air, warm. My lungs pulled in a breath that didn't feel like swallowing broken glass. I was sitting on a couch, my couch, in my apartment. The one that in my other memory had been a frozen tomb for the last 90-something days. There was a calendar on the wall. August 8th. I want to be very clear about what August 8th means. In my first life, August 8th, 2:20 in the afternoon, was the last completely normal moment the human race ever got. 40 minutes later, the sky did something the sky is not supposed to do. The temperature fell off a cliff, and by nightfall, the first snow was coming down in a warm coastal city in August, and it did not stop coming down for a very, very long time. I looked at my phone, 1:40 p.m., August 8th, 40 minutes. I had 40 minutes. I did the only reasonable thing a man does when the universe hands him a second run at the worst day in human history. I laughed, kind of a wet, ugly, hiccuping laugh, sitting there alone on my couch, because I remembered everything. 90 days of it. Every frozen corpse, every trade, every place the food was, every person who was about to become a monster, and top of the list, underlined, circled, starred, exactly who was going to put a knife in me and exactly when. This time I decided nobody keeps a dog. This time I keep everything. That's when the voice showed up in my head, and honestly, given the week I'd had, a voice in my head was the least surprising thing on the menu. Binding host. Super vending machine acquired. A little space opened up behind my eyes. That's the only way I can describe it. Like a room I'd always had but never noticed, about the size of a walk-in closet, maybe 6 cubic meters, and floating in the middle of it. A vending machine. Glowing softly, the way a vending machine glows at 3 a.m. in a train station when you're the only human left awake in the world, and it's the only thing that will still sell you a warm can of anything. There was a search bar on the front. I thought the word cola at it, mostly to test whether I'd finally lost it. The screen lit up. Cola. 3 yuan a can. Stock, unlimited. Below it, a note that it would quietly pull the money straight out of my phone wallet. I bought one. 3 yuan gone. A cold can dropped into the tray with a clunk that I felt somewhere behind my sinuses. And then the machine said, "Thank you," in the only language a machine like this speaks. Experience +3. I blinked. There was a bar now, in the corner of that little room. Experience. 3 out of 20,000. Level 1. Let me make sure I understood this, because I'd written enough of these stories to be dangerous. I used to be a web novelist. That was my whole career, cranking out cultivation fantasies for readers who mostly told me I was bad at it, so I knew a leveling mechanic when one bit me. I bought a second cola, 3 yuan. Experience +3. Oh no. Oh, this was beautiful, and this was a trap, and I loved it. The machine didn't level up when I sold things. It leveled up when I bought things. Every yuan I spent buying stock, it pocketed as experience. The way to power was to go broke. The more money I burned, the stronger the machine got. Bigger space, better inventory, and, the search helpfully informed me when I went looking, actual weapons. About 1,000 kinds of gun in there. A Desert Eagle for 35,000 yuan, which was a lot of cola, and which was grayed out anyway, locked until the machine hit level 5. There was also, way down at the bottom of the catalog where the truly stupid dreams live, an aircraft carrier, 10 billion yuan, unlocks at level 21. I sat with that for a second. I'm a man who 40 minutes ago had a knife in his furnace, and the system's opening pitch to me was, essentially, someday, if you spend the GDP of a small nation, you can have a boat. Then I found the fine print, and the fine print was the machine baring its teeth. If I ever bought something I couldn't actually pay for, if my wallet came up short, it would take the difference out of my experience instead. And if my experience ran all the way down to zero, the machine and the little room and everything I'd crammed into it would simply vanish. Poof. Back to being an ordinary man with a knife-shaped memory in his gut. So there it was. The exploit closed before I could even reach for it. No, I couldn't just conjure infinite free stuff. No, I couldn't bind it to somebody else and walk away. Everything cost money going in, and if I ran dry, I didn't just stop leveling, I lost the whole cheat. The machine wanted me hungry, spending, always one bad month from zero. Cool, very cool, love that for me. But you know what? I could work with rules I understood. It was people I'd stopped trusting. And I had 40 minutes, a photographic memory of the end of the world, and a magic box that got stronger the more recklessly I shopped. Time to go broke on purpose. First rule of the apocalypse, learned the hard way the first time. Money is about to become the least valuable thing in the world, right after good intentions. So I was going to spend all of mine before it turned into confetti. I started shopping like a man being chased. Rice, flour, oil in the big ugly jugs, canned everything, bottled water by the pallet, because I already knew the thing nobody knew yet, that when the snow came, melting it and drinking it would kill you slower and nastier than starving. Generators, diesel, gasoline. A doomsday premium rain jacket rated to -80 degrees that the machine flagged as system selected, and then, with the timing of a street vendor who's read you perfectly, locked behind level 8. Fine. Noted. I want 2. Every purchase, the machine went, experience plus whatever, happy as a clam, and I watched my bank balance drop and my little glowing room fill up, and I felt genuinely, stupidly good for the first time in 2 lifetimes. I was getting rich by going broke. Turns out that's a thing now. Then I did the pettiest thing I have ever done, and I'd do it again. I emptied my apartment, all of it. Furniture, the fridge, the pots, the good knives, the spare blankets, everything not nailed down went into the space. Because in about an hour, Chen Jing was going to come home to our place, expecting to loot it, and I wanted her to walk into 4 bare walls and an echo. A little going away present. From the dog. While I was at it, I found something even better than the search bar. A recycle function. I dropped an old comforter in buyback, 30 yuan, straight back into my wallet. Turns out the machine would buy back my own junk. Only mine, mind you. It knew whose hands things had passed through. So I fed it every scrap Chen Jing had ever left in my apartment. Her clothes, her half-used cans, the little accumulated sediment of a relationship, and got paid to erase her from the place. Balance ticked up to 126 yuan and change. Emotional closure, 30 yuan at a time. I also bought a fistful of pinhole cameras and spent 10 careful minutes hiding them around the apartment, because I wasn't going to be here. But I very much wanted to watch. Then I steamed myself an Australian lobster, sat in my empty apartment eating it with my fingers, and toasted the ceiling. To my second life. May it be a lot less generous to the people who ended my first one. The plan wasn't complicated, it was just mine, which was a nice change. I knew a place. 2 rows of townhouses over by Taoyuan Square, and in that second row, Villa number 4, empty. In my first life, it stayed empty right up until it didn't matter anymore, and more importantly, some careful doomed soul had stocked its basement, reinforced it, and, this was the good part, cut an underground passage from it straight to the square, a fortress that nobody knew was a fortress. I was going to go live in a dead woman's dream and be very grateful to her for it, so I packed a bag of nothing much, since everything I owned was now living behind my eyes, and I walked over, and that is where I met the most dangerous woman I would ever con. She was standing by a black SUV outside the townhouses, about to leave, wearing a dress that cost more than my last month of being alive, and holding an umbrella against the drizzle that had just started, the first drops of a rain that, in half an hour, was going to turn white. Elegant, poised, the kind of beautiful that makes you stand up straighter on reflex. She looked at me the way you look at a stray that's wandered into a nice neighborhood. I did not have time to explain that I was a reincarnated apocalypse veteran here to squat in her spare fortress, so I lied. Sorry, you haven't seen a guy named Lin Shan around here, have you? I let my face do something wounded and furious. He owes me, a lot. When I find him, I'm going to. I let it trail off in a way that suggested the end of that sentence was illegal. She didn't believe me for a second, I could tell, but she was kind under the wariness, and she handed me her umbrella anyway. There's no hurdle that can't be crossed, she said. which was the single most wrong thing anyone said to me all day, given what was crossing the horizon. Then she drove off. I let myself into Villa number 4 with a master key I'd bought from the machine for pocket change because nothing says home like breaking into it, and I stood in the doorway of my new life, an orphan and a novelist and a dead man, and thought, 40 minutes, now about 15, let it snow. Right on schedule, it snowed, not gently. The rain thickened, went pale, and then the sky just gave up being sky and started coming down in fat, wet flakes in August on a coastal city where people had been complaining about the heat at lunch. I stood at the window of Villa number 4 and watched it start, and I felt the temperature drop through the glass like a hand closing. Somewhere out there, several million people were pulling out their phones to film the pretty snow. Charming. First snow of the summer. I knew exactly how many of them would still be alive to see it stop. I did not film it. I had a lobster to digest and an ex to torment. Because here's the thing about my little camera farm back at the apartment. It was already earning. My phone buzzed. Chen Jing. Calling, sweet as pie, right on cue. I could hear the exact texture of the lie in her voice before she even got a full sentence out. Honey, she cooed, it's raining out. Are you staying warm? Did you eat? Don't tire yourself, okay? Somewhere in a hotel across town, she was almost certainly still tangled up with my best friend, and she was calling to make sure the dog was fed and functional. Today was her birthday, by the way. I'd booked a hotel too, the good one, and there was a ring in my coat pocket in the other life, the pocket a knife would go through in 3 months. Just out shopping, actually, I said, warm as anything. Trying to find something nice for the birthday girl. It's really coming down out here. Aw, you're so good to me. I could hear her smiling. I could hear Lin Shan breathing near the phone. Hurry home, Mum. Wouldn't miss it, I said. I hung up and switched to the cameras. I got to watch, in real time and glorious silence, Chen Jing let herself into our apartment, expecting a warm nest full of things to steal, and find instead 4 bare walls, 1 bare floor, and the specific dawning horror of a person who has just been robbed by the exact man she was planning to rob. She turned in a slow circle, she opened the empty fridge, she checked the empty closets, and then, this is the part I'll treasure, she called Lin Shan in, and the two of them stood in the middle of my beautifully empty apartment and cuddled for comfort, 2 thieves consoling each other over an empty cupboard. I ate a piece of lobster I'd saved and enjoyed the show. Best television I'd seen in 2 lifetimes. I made a note too, because a man should be organized about these things. There was a girl named Su Lei, Lin Shan's actual girlfriend, the one he was cheating on with Chen Jing, the one who in my first life got trapped at her office and froze to death alone because nobody came for her. Sweet girl. Wrong crowd. I filed her under things to fix. And there was Elder Lao, Grand Elder Lao, the security guard from the compound, the one man in my first life who'd shown me kindness for no reason twice and gotten nothing for it. I sent him a quiet message on WeChat. No explanation. Stock up on food and water, uncle, as much as you can. Trust me, it cost me nothing to try to save the one person who'd been decent to me. If the world was ending again, at least I could aim it a little. Outside, the snow kept stacking up and the temperature kept falling, and the last normal afternoon in human history quietly closed for business. I had 2 weeks of relative calm before the real monsters started, and a magic box that needed feeding. Let's get to work. Now, if you're going to rob the future, you have to know where the future keeps its good stuff. And I did, because I'd already lived it once and taken notes with my whole ruined life. Here's a fact nobody had yet. In about 2 weeks, plants were going to start doing something impossible. Certain ones, the ones not buried and killed under the snow, would mutate. And every so often one of them would grow a fruit, an ability fruit. Eat it, and you woke up a superpower. That's how the whole superhuman thing started. That's how Lin Shan got his ice, how I got my fire the first time around, how every monster with a name got its teeth. The machine sold them too, of course. 1 million yuan each, locked behind level 10, which told me exactly how badly I needed to get to level 10. But I didn't have to wait for the machine, because I remembered a specific plant in a specific apartment belonging to a specific person. Zhang Yu. Young Lady Zhang, everybody called her, this small pure-faced thing who looked like she'd cry if you raised your voice, and who, in my first life, robbed my house 3 separate times by walking through the walls. She'd gotten a wall-walking power off a fruit that grew from an ordinary golden pothos, one of those leafy things people keep on their desks to look responsible. So I looked up the seller of that exact kind of pothos, a guy who went by Winding Path online, Building 7, Unit 1102, and I bought 3 of his pots for 500 yuan each, overpaid wildly for houseplants. But one of those 3, in about 2 weeks, was going to sprout the fruit that gives you the power to phase through solid walls, and I intended to own that power before the girl who was supposed to use it against me ever got the chance. While I was being productive, I took a walk over to Lin Shan's building and let myself into Unit 702, empty, since he was off freezing to death slowly with Chen Jing somewhere warmer, and I decorated it with pinhole cameras too. Call it a housewarming. I like to know what my future murderers were up to. I was building a surveillance state, a food empire, and a grudge, all before dinner. Over the next few days, the world got a lot colder, and my ex-girlfriend and my ex-best friend got a lot hungrier, and I got to watch both. See, Chen Jing and Lin Shan had made a plan, and I knew the plan because I could see their living room. The plan was, keep the dog, keep me, keep the useless, soft-hearted idiot who'd do anything for love, and send him out into the killing cold to fetch food, because two people who cannot use a can opener without complaining were not, it turned out, natural survivors. So Chen Jing kept calling. All sugar. Honey, could you bring by some food? It's just so hard to get out there. And I kept being the most devoted boyfriend in the apocalypse. Oh, I would, I said, sounding genuinely heartbroken, but you will not believe the day I had. 7, 8 guys jumped me in the stairwell, took everything, the rice, the water, they even took the birthday cake, Chen Jing, and then one of them slapped me. It's a war zone out there. Silence on the line, the special silence of two people recalculating whether their dog is worth keeping if he can't fetch. I want to be clear that I was enjoying this more than is probably healthy, but you have to understand the math from their side. An ordinary person, no power, no supplies, in this cold, 3 weeks, tops, and the only reason Lin Shan had survived long enough to awaken his ice in the first place, last time, was that I'd spent those 3 weeks keeping him alive. I was his life support machine and he'd killed me for the crime of loving him. So no, I did not feel bad watching him ration a single sad instant noodle brick between two people while he schemed about how to squeeze one more grocery run out of me. I felt like a man watching the weather, and the forecast was cold, with a chance of consequences. But I wasn't only in the revenge business. I had a girl to save, and a car to borrow, and a landlord to charm, and it turned out those were all the same errand. The girl was Su Lei, Lin Shan's girlfriend, the one he was betraying with Chen Jing, the one who froze alone at her office last time. She didn't deserve any of them. So I did something surgical and a little cruel. I took one of the clips off Lin Shan's bedroom camera, him and Chen Jing, unmistakable, and I sent it to her. No message, just the truth, in high definition. It broke her. I watched it land through my own phone, the little typing bubble appearing and disappearing while a person rearranged her entire understanding of her life. For one raw second, she typed something wild, some half-formed idea about sleeping with his mistress to get even, then deleted it, ashamed. Good. She had fire in there. It just needed somewhere better to point. The car belonged to my elegant neighbor, Wu Mei, the Gucci dress woman who'd handed me an umbrella and told me no hurdle couldn't be crossed. I came bearing gifts, good wine, fresh seafood, the sort of things that had become impossible to get and that I could produce from thin air, and asked, very politely, to borrow her SUV. She agreed with one condition. While I had it, I'd swing by Jiangcheng University and pick up her little sister, Gao Ting. And over that transaction, I finally got her whole story, because a scared person tells you more than they mean to. Wu Mei was a widow. Her husband, Chen Bo, was dead. And her husband's brother, a man named Liu Kai, who I knew that name the way you know a scar, had decided that his brother's beautiful widow ought to become his concubine. She'd said no. She'd walked away from the entire Song family fortune to say no, and fled here, to a quiet row of townhouses she quietly owned every inch of, which is when she dropped the line that reframed my whole living situation. This row all belongs to me, she said, watching my face very carefully, Villa 4 included. So tell me, when exactly did I have a neighbor? Ah. She thought I was a Song family spy, planted next door to watch her. And honestly, from where she was standing, a strange man appearing out of nowhere to squat in her empty fortress and ask friendly questions was not a crazy thing to be terrified of. I made a note that Wu Mei was nobody's fool, filed it next to the note about Liu Kai, and went to go pick up her sister and, as it turned out, commit a small public act of violence. Su Lei's office was where the day earned its keep. I got there to find her cornered in a restroom by her department head, a slab of a man named Hao Ji, 6 feet of him, 200 pounds, the kind of guy who'd been waiting his whole career for a world without police. He'd somehow filmed her watching that clip I sent, the one of Lin Shan, and he was using it, leaning on her, hand on the wall, explaining in that reasonable predator voice how things could go easier for her if she was friendly. She stomped her heel down on his instep hard enough that I heard him yell from the hall, and she bolted. But he had lackeys, and they filled the doorway, and that's about when I walked in. I didn't make a speech. I'd learned about speeches. I put a dagger, bought 3,000 yuan, one of two, across the palm of the nearest lackey, a shallow line that turned his hand into a very persuasive argument, and I took Su Lei by the shoulder and said, loud and flat, "You're touching my wife." Then I dealt with Hao Ji. I'll spare you the play-by-play. The summary is that he left the encounter one pinky finger lighter and with the strong, clear understanding that if he ever went to whatever passed for the authorities, I knew where his whole family slept. He believed me. People can always tell when you mean it. I put Sule in the SUV and drove off, and she looked at me. This stranger who just called her his wife and taken a man apart to prove it, and she leaned across the console and kissed me, which is the exact moment a voice piped up from the back seat. Okay, you, I'm literally right here. Gao Ting, the little sister. Pigtails, big suspicious eyes, hiding in the back the entire time, sent by her sister to figure out whether I was a Song family spy, and now armed with the observation that the maybe spy had a fake wife who kissed him in cars. This was going to be a long drive. The drive home was an interrogation, and I was the only suspect. Gao Ting had climbed over into the passenger seat and was studying me like a customs officer who's found something ticking. So, she said, you're the guy in Villa 4. My sister thinks you're a spy. Are you a spy? If I were a spy, I said, would I have picked you up from school? Spies don't run errands. She narrowed her eyes at that, then apparently decided it was a solid point because she switched tactics. Then who's she? A thumb at Sule. My wife. You met her today. It was a fast romance. Outside the windows, August continued not to look like August. Snow was piling on the frozen palm trees. Somebody's news app on the dash was reporting that the beaches down in Sanya, tropical Sanya, the place people go to escape winter, had iced over. Gao Ting watched all this go by and, credit to her, drew the correct conclusion faster than most of the country would. Something enormous and permanent had just gone wrong with the world, and the man driving her home did not seem even slightly surprised by it. She stopped asking if I was a spy after that. She'd landed on a worse suspicion, which was that I knew something. I returned the car with more gifts and a friendly wave, and I felt Wu Mei watching me from her window the whole way back into number 4. That night, she checked the security feed on Villa 4, the cameras she'd had installed when she renovated it, and found them all dead. Smashed. Because I'd smashed them my first hour in the house. From her side, the picture was simple and awful. Someone was living in her fortress. Someone who disabled surveillance. Someone with a fake wife and too many resources. A professional. A songman. She was wrong about who. She was very right to be scared. Sule moved in that night because she had nowhere else and because I let her. She stood in the marble entryway of Villa 4 with snow melting off her coat and stared at the place like it was a mirage, hot water, real food, a man who'd cut a finger off her boss for touching her. She'd spent the day learning that her boyfriend was a cheat, her boss was a predator, and the polite economy she'd built her life around had evaporated, and here was warmth. I could see her wanting to just fall into it, so naturally I made it complicated because I don't trust easy things anymore. I sat her down, and I was honest in the specific cold way I'd earned. You can stay here, you'll be warm, you'll be fed, and nobody will touch you. But I don't want a scared woman who's here because it's the warm option. I've had one of those. I didn't say Chen Jing's name, I didn't have to. So take tonight, decide whether you're in this all the way, heart included, or whether you're just cold. If it's just cold, I'll still send you off with supplies, but I'm not going to sleep next to someone who's waiting for a better offer. She spent that night not sleeping. I know because I watched her, through the same cameras I watch everything, work up her nerve, and video call Lin Shan. She was cleverer than he deserved. She got him talking in a dark room, got him lying about Chen Jing with his whole chest, and then, when he'd buried himself completely, she said the 4 best words I'd heard all week. We're done, don't call. And hung up on 10 years of his manipulation. Then she came upstairs and knocked on my door and told me she'd decided. I'll give you the one line I'll give you about that night, because a gentleman keeps the rest. 2 adults, 1 warm room, a door that stayed closed. Afterward, I told her the same thing I'd told her before, because I meant it the same either way. I wanted the whole person, not just tonight, and I sent her back to her own room to be sure of it in daylight. Slow is a luxury, but I'd been rushed into love once, and it had put a knife in me. This time, I could afford to be careful. Morning arrived under a meter of snow. Overnight, the whole world had gone white and hard and -40, and the drift had climbed to the bottom of the first floor windows. Sule woke up, looked outside, and finally, fully believed me, that doomsday wasn't a word I was using to be dramatic. I taught her how to cook on a real stove, which she found either romantic or apocalyptic, hard to say. She checked the news and there was no more pretending. Global snow, cities dark, the tropics frozen, and underneath every official statement, the same word in different fonts. Unprecedented. Which is government for we have no idea. And this is where my real business opened for the season. I registered a fresh WeChat account, a burner, so nobody could connect my supply operation to the quiet man in Villa 4. I needed a name, something friendly, something that sounded like a nice small family enterprise and not like a man about to strip an entire community of its savings. I went with Harmony Brings Wealth. I'm going to be honest, I was proud of it. It has a warm little tea house energy. It sounds like it should come with a free calendar. And later, I'd give the operation a logo, a cheerful cross knife and fork, which I thought communicated hospitality and good eating, and which every single person who saw it read instead as the sign for a highway rest stop. People kept asking if I had a bathroom and vending machines. I did have vending machines, just the one technically, and it was behind my eyes. Then Harmony Brings Wealth posted its first message to the townhouse owners group chat: supplies available, delivery at the safe passage under Taoyuan Square, and I set my prices low. On purpose. Cheap, friendly, come one come all. Because the fastest way to own a market is to be the only kind face in it right up until everyone depends on you, and then to very slowly stop being cheap while they starve and harvest their life savings into the belly of a magic box. Warm name, cold plan. Harmony Brings Wealth. Mine. The group chat did not stay friendly for long, and that was the design, because after the first cheap, generous day, I raised the prices. Instant noodles, 1,000 yuan a pack. Canned meat, 3,000. A single can of cola, the humble 3 yuan can that fed my entire empire, 500. The chat detonated. There was a man everyone called Old Lee who took it personally, as if I'd insulted his mother rather than his budget, and a woman going by Blossoms of Fortune who wrote paragraphs about morality, about hoarding, about how people like me were what was wrong with the world. I read every word. Then I blacklisted them both, which in a market with one seller is roughly the same as exiling them to the snow, and I watched the tone of everyone else in the chat change very quickly once they saw what happened to the loud ones, but I wasn't stupid about it. The group chat had an owner, the property manager, a tired man named Wang who held the one thing I actually needed, which was standing in this community. So while I gouged the crowd, I quietly delivered free noodles, water, and oil to Wang's door. Protection is cheaper than war. Keep the man with the keys fed and friendly, and let everyone else scream into the void. Meanwhile, the real news kept confirming my memory point by point. No rescue coming. Planes couldn't fly in this. The train stations had become crushes of desperate people going nowhere. Officials promising relief through channels that everyone could feel were empty. And I sat warm in Villa 4, watching a whole city slowly understand that no one was coming, and I priced my noodles accordingly. I know how this makes me sound. I'd made my peace with it. I'd already been the good soft man who shared and trusted and loved, and the world had filmed it and stabbed me and told me to be a good boy and die. So this time I was going to be the man with the food. And everyone who'd ever tossed 2,000 yuan at a dog's feet was going to buy their life back from me, one overpriced can at a time. Sule passed the test I hadn't told her she was taking, and she passed it without blinking. She came home that evening, home, our home now, and did something that reset a little cold gear inside me. She knelt to put slippers on my feet, warm ones. She'd cooked, badly. She burned the fish so thoroughly that I quietly recycled the entire wok into the machine for 60 experience, a small profit on a domestic disaster. And when I asked her, testing, whether she had any savings, she didn't hesitate, didn't count, didn't ask why. 250,000, she said, and transferred all of it to me on the spot. Every yuan she had in the world, handed to a man she'd known for 3 days, because he'd asked. Now, some of that money was going straight into the machine's gullet. 250,000 yuan of experience was exactly the fuel I needed to punch through to level 5 and unlock a pistol for the ugly 2 weeks before the ability fruits ripened. But that's not what made me put my hand over hers. It was that she'd handed me the knife and turned her back. After Chen Jing, that meant more than the money. Record something for me, she said, teasing. When she saw my face do something it didn't usually do. So I did. I said the words into her phone. As long as you never betray me, I will never abandon you. She played it back 3 times and decided to quit her job, pointless now anyway, and be, in her words, my homemaker at the end of the world. Outside, it hit -49. The building's dying air conditioners gave up and we lit oil lamps. The official channels were promising relief through the underground railway now, which I knew was another empty promise wearing a nicer coat. And somewhere out there, the Song family was already licking its lips at the city's grain depot. But inside Villa 4, a woman who'd been betrayed by everyone had bet everything on me in one clean motion, and I decided, quietly, the way I decide the things I actually mean, that whatever else happened, Sule was going to make it to the end of this. The next morning, she tried to talk me out of my entire business model, and it's the reason I trusted her completely. She'd been thinking. She sat me down, very serious, and made her case. I should stop selling. All this posting and pricing and gouging, she decided it was a scheme to manipulate the market, pump the prices, and she thought it was beneath me and, more to the point, doomed. Money's going to be worthless, she said. Use my 250,000 to buy supplies while it still means something and stockpile. Don't sell. Buy. She had it exactly backwards and I loved her for it. She wasn't trying to hoard money against me. She was trying to spend her own money to make us safer. She thought the alt account was some greedy stranger and she wanted to protect me from becoming him. She had no idea Harmony Brings Wealth was sitting across the table wearing my face. Then she video called her old office. Her colleagues were still trapped there, freezing, and one of them, Lulu, begged her for a rescue, offered her 2,000 yuan to come get her. And Sule, my soft sweet Sule, said no, cold and clear. Search the news. Read the words Ice Age. No one is coming for you, and I'm not driving into that to die with you. Then she hung up and called me husband and asked what was for breakfast. That's when I knew. A person who'll hand you everything and still say no to the world when it's stupid to say yes, that's not softness. That's the good kind of hard. I decided right then that when the fruits came, one of them was hers. By the third morning, the snow had swallowed most of the first floor and the thermometer read -60, and I started asking a question that would eventually get me killed if I didn't answer it. Where was the army? I sealed the house first, bought level 2 insulation film and industrial superglue from the machine, and taught Sule to line the walls with it, the two of us working room by room like we were gift wrapping a bunker. Warm, sealed, stocked, good. But the question kept itching. Because the snow, for all its horror, wasn't actually that hard to move. It was deep, but it was loose. Powder, not concrete. A determined crew with the right machine could clear roads, and the Zhangcheng military camp was only a few dozen kilometers north. So why was there no army digging out this city? No convoys, no relief, no boots. In my first life, I'd been too busy dying to wonder. This time I had the luxury of curiosity, and curiosity, in the apocalypse, is worth more than gold. I bought a snowmobile. A good one. The machine sold it folded down palm-sized, and it unfolded to full size when I pulled it out of the space, which is exactly the kind of nonsense I was learning to take for granted. Buying it also tipped the machine over into level 2, which meant more experience needed for the next rung, but also a bigger space and better stock. Progress. I was going to ride north and find out why the people whose entire job was saving us had, as far as I could tell, quietly decided not to. The snowmobile also created a problem next door, which was that it had an engine, and engines make noise. Wu Mei heard it. Of course she did. A powerful motor firing up in the fortress beside hers, coming and going at odd hours. And in the story she'd been telling herself, the one where a Song family professional had been planted next to her, a snowmobile was the final brushstroke. Now the spy had a vehicle. Now he could follow her anywhere. Now there was no running. I found out later she sat in her cold house that night and seriously, genuinely considered giving up. Considered going back to Liu Kai, becoming the thing she'd given up a fortune to avoid, because at least then the watching would stop. She was that cornered, and it was entirely my fault, and I didn't even know I was doing it. Two people can share a wall and live in completely different horror stories. I'd fix it eventually. But first, I had a woman to rescue on the way to work, because apparently, that was just going to be my life now. A few kilometers north, someone was waving a bedsheet out of a second-floor window. I almost rode past it. Then I saw the arm, thin, exhausted, flagging me down with the last of somebody's strength, and I stopped because information is currency and desperate people are full of it. The window belonged to a woman named He Hua, and I knew the name the second she said it because in my other life, she'd been famous. A second-tier movie actress, the spicy chicken girl from some ad campaign, the kind of face you half recognize from a bus stop. She'd been in Zhangcheng shooting a film when the world froze, snowed into a strange villa with no food and no water, and she'd been alive for the last 2 days on 2 bags of potato chips and her own stubbornness. She was also, I clocked immediately, careful, guarded. She talked to me through a barely cracked window, keeping her body out of view, a woman who'd spent a career learning that men who help you always want to be paid. Smart. I respected it, and I priced accordingly. I didn't rescue her. I sold to her 100,000 yuan for a load of supplies, payment first, and I meant it. But I also handed up a couple of packs of instant noodles and some ham through the gap, free, to keep her breathing until the afternoon delivery, because a customer who dies before payment clears is bad business, and because even I'm not made entirely of ice. I told her to stay behind the curtains, keep out of sight, and wait for me. She studied me through the crack with an expression I recognized. Curiosity. The dangerous kind. The kind a person feels about a man they can't quite read. Then I rode on north, toward the camp, and toward the answer to my question, and I thought, just for a second, about Grandelder Lao, somewhere out in this cold. I wasn't ready to go to him yet, but he was on the list. Everyone was on the list. I was just deciding, one ride at a time, which column each name went in. My flashy ride did not go unnoticed, which is the problem with flashy rides. I passed 2 office towers on the way north, and behind their frosted glass, envy was doing what envy does. A tech company boss named Mr. Wang, a bespectacled aide at his elbow, and across the way, a Mr. Lee in the opposite building, three men watching a healthy, warm, well-supplied stranger zip by on a machine that could carry a person out of this frozen city. They wanted it. And they had a plan. The kind of plan that men who've never done violence come up with. Lay cardboard out over the snow so they could walk out to the road, string a rope, and ambush me on my way back to steal the snowmobile. I didn't know the details yet, but I knew the type. You could feel the greed radiating off those buildings like heat off a radiator. I filed them under later and kept writing. While I rode, I thought about why I was even doing any of this, because it's a fair question. I'm not an ambitious man fundamentally. I don't dream of thrones. What I want, all I've ever wanted, is to not be at anyone's mercy. Last life, Chen Jing made sure I never joined a faction, never got strong, stayed the useful soft dog. So this life, I was going to build the thing that makes a man untouchable, which unfortunately turns out to be an enormous amount of power. Freedom's expensive. You have to buy the whole world just to be left alone in a corner of it. The digging toward the camp was too slow by hand, so I fed the machine some more of Sulei's money and a shopping spree of supplies and clothes, which knocked it up to level 3, doubling my space and better, unlocking self-defense gear. I bought a second dagger, and I bought the Shenbi crossbow, 3,000 yuan, fires 3 bolts fast and then needs a moment to catch its breath, quiet as a held breath. In a world where a gunshot brings every hungry thing running, quiet was worth more than caliber. Level 3 also sold me the single stupidest brilliant thing I have ever purchased, a snow removal robot. It was a moron. I want to be clear about that. The machine's own description basically admitted it, a dumb, blind, tireless little unit that trundled forward spraying snow out of its path in all directions, including, frequently, directly into me. It couldn't see. It didn't care. It would happily bury its own operator, but it was silent and it dug, and this was the genius part. It gave me perfect cover. A snow removal robot clearing a path is invisible. Nobody looks twice at a machine doing machine things. I could walk behind it straight up to the enemy's doorstep inside a tunnel of its own making. So I followed my idiot robot north, dug a long low tunnel under the snow toward the green building that housed the Jiangcheng military camp, and finished the last stretch by hand, quiet as a mouse until I was pressed up against the wall by the camp's entrance with my ear practically on the brick, and then I got the most valuable eavesdrop of my second life. 2 men were talking on the other side of that wall, and what they said rearranged my entire understanding of the apocalypse. One was an officer, Brother Wang, the others called him Wang Peng, apparently the ranking man now that some Colonel Liu had already pulled out. The other was a secretary type, and the orders they were discussing were not hold the city. The orders were leave it. The army was splitting. One group would fall back to guard the capital, Longcheng. The other was heading east to the coast to a place called Penglai, where... And the secretary lowered his voice here, so I had to strain. Something happened along the frozen shoreline. Something bad enough to redirect a military. Meanwhile, the elites, the scientists, the useful, and the rich had already been quietly moved into a doomsday shelter. The working estimate they said out loud, flat, like a weather report, was that 95% of the human race was not going to survive this. What they were running was no longer a rescue. It was a species preservation plan. Save the seeds, abandon the field. I was still absorbing that when a third voice arrived and my blood went colder than the snow around me because I knew it. Liu Kai, come to say a warm goodbye to his old friend Wang Peng. And in the easy way old friends talk, the whole rotten arrangement fell out. Wang Peng, it turned out, was the man who'd murdered Liu Kai's elder brother for him, Chen Bo, Wu Mei's husband, the car accident. That's how Liu Kai became head of the Song family over his brother's body with a soldier's help. And now, as a parting gift between murderers, Wang Peng gave Liu Kai a tip. The moment the troops pull out, in about 30 minutes, the Jiangcheng grain depot will be undefended. Take it. Feed your family. And... this part, he asked quietly, one killer to another, look after my mother, my wife, my kid, when I'm gone. That was the answer to my whole question. That was why the Song family would own this city's grain uncontested, not strength. A handshake between a soldier and a snake, over a wall, while a dead man's brother listened from inside the snow. I had 30 minutes and a map of the future. But first I had to survive the next 5, because Liu Kai, it turned out, had noticed the neat little tunnel in the snow, and left something in it for me. The something was a mountain in a coat. Nearly 2 meters of him, an iron rod in one hand, waiting where my tunnel met the open. Liu Kai was no fool. He'd seen the fresh dug channel, understood someone had been listening, and left a bodyguard behind to catch the eavesdropper and squeeze the secret out of him. And here I was, wedged in loose powder that gave under my feet like water, with a giant swinging a metal bar at my head. I couldn't outmuscle him. So I did what I do. I talked, and I let my idiot robot help. I kept him trading words with me. kept him half distracted by the snow-spraying machine blundering between us, kept shifting so the loose drift worked against his weight more than mine, and the instant he committed to a big overhead swing, I put a single crossbow bolt through his forehead. He went down and he did not get up. I checked the face to be sure. I knew it. Guo Tao, in my first life, one of Liu Kai's monsters, a strength type who'd awakened into a walking siege engine and done a great deal of damage before anyone put him down. Here he was, dying in the snow before he ever ate his fruit, killed by a masked stranger he never identified, one future catastrophe, unmade. I was fully wrapped against the cold, not an inch of me showing. Liu Kai would never know whose bolt it was. Good. Let the snake wonder. I dragged the robot back into its tunnel and rode for home, one enemy lighter and a whole doomsday's worth of secrets heavier. The office tower geniuses were waiting for me on the way back, exactly as advertised. Cardboard walkways laid over the snow. A rope stretched across my path. Mr. Wang's people from one building, Mr. Lee's from the other, converging to relieve me of my snowmobile and probably my life. It was almost sweet, how proud of the plan they clearly were. I put a crossbow bolt through the bespectacled aide's throat before the rest of them finished standing up. 1 second he was there, smug behind his glasses. The next he was a lesson, and everybody else got very quiet and very cooperative. Then I robbed them. All of them. This is the part I'm proud of. I didn't just scare them off, I paired them up, and I made each pair drain their WeChat and Alipay balances, every yuan, transferring it to one terrified man named Wang Wei, who then forwarded the whole pile to me. 2 office buildings worth of savings. Roughly 3 million yuan poured straight down the throat of my magic box. I even added Wang Wei as a customer. Welcome to Harmony Brings Wealth, because a man that's scared makes a wonderfully reliable buyer. By the time I rode off, Mr. Wang and Mr. Lee had already started blaming each other, 2 would-be robbers turning on each other over a robbery that had robbed them. I left them to it. I had 3 million reasons to feel warm, a machine to feed, and a 2-week countdown ticking toward the day the fruits ripened and the whole city started growing teeth. 3 million yuan sounds like a lot until you look at the ladder. Here's the cruel arithmetic of my magic box. Every level doubled the experience needed for the next one. Getting to level 10, where the ability fruits lived, where the real power started, was going to cost something like 10 million yuan. Poured in, gone, converted to nothing but a number ticking up behind my eyes. 3 million was a good day. It wasn't a finished job, but I'd stopped pretending this was about getting rich. Money was fuel now, and I was a man who decided to build an engine big enough that no one could ever put a knife in it again. So, I kept the ladder in view and kept climbing. On to the next errand, which, as it happened, was delivering a movie star her groceries and being the most perfect gentleman she'd ever met, entirely on purpose. I swapped the loud snowmobile for a quiet pair of skis and brought Hihua her supplies. She was weak by then. 2 days on chips will do that. And when I passed the heavy sack up through her window, she asked me, in a small voice, if I'd carry it in for her. She could barely lift it, and every instinct a normal man has said go in, help her, be kind. I declined. Politely, warmly. I set the sack just inside the sill, wished her well, and left, because I knew exactly what I was doing. A woman like Hihua, beautiful, guarded, a professional at reading which men want something, has her walls up for the pushy ones, the ones who invite themselves in. What she has no defense against is the one who doesn't. Decline the open door and you become the interesting one, the safe one, the puzzle. I wasn't being noble. I was playing a longer game than she knew was being played, and the first move was to leave her wondering what I looked like under the mask and why the one man who'd helped her hadn't wanted anything for it. She ate her first hot meal in days behind those curtains and, I'd bet, thought about me the whole time. She even worried out loud about a friend of hers, someone named Li Feng stuck down in frozen Sanya. I filed the name, because you never know, and skied home feeling like a con artist who's just made a very good investment in patience. I got home to a locked door and a terrified woman who wouldn't open it. Sule. She'd wedged herself in a closet and stayed there half the day. While I was gone, 2 men, brothers, a tall thin one and a short fat one, had come to Villa 4 and tried to smash their way in through the window. The reinforced glass I'd installed had held. That upgrade had just paid for itself in the only currency that matters. But they'd left promising to come back with tools, and they would. And Sule had spent hours hiding, unable to reach me because the military camp's jamming had killed her phone signal at the worst possible time. I got her out of the closet and I held her while she shook, and under the comfort, something in me went very cold and very still. I'd built this place to be safe. 2 greedy nobodies had made my wife hide in the dark for half a day. That wasn't a threat to my supplies. That was a threat to the one thing I was actually protecting. They wanted to come back? Good. I'd be home this time. Before they came back, I went shopping for the occasion, and this time, the machine finally sold me guns. First I bought level 5 high-signal walkie-talkies, 50,000 yen the pair, so Sule would never again be trapped in silence while the world came through the window. That one wasn't strategy, that was just so she'd never be that scared again. Then I stocked the basement freezers with sale goods, and between the walkie-talkies and the restock, the machine finally clicked over to level 5. Level 5 unlocked the gun rack. I bought pistols. 2 Walther PPKs, small and clean, though I hid those away rather than arm Sule yet, because trust is a thing you build in daylight and I wasn't handing a gun to anyone until I was sure which way it would point. For myself, I took 2 Colt 1911s and a good stack of magazines, tucked into the space where they'd be an arm's reach away in any room of my life. The submachine guns I wanted were still locked behind level 9, so I noted them, the way you note a nice apartment you can't afford yet. By the time I finished, I'd spent nearly all of Sule's 250,000 and then some, and I felt not one flicker of guilt because I was turning her money into the guarantee she'd survive. I bought bulletproof glass too, and better insulation film, and started puzzling over how to install glass that heavy without a crew. A problem for tomorrow. Tonight I had guests coming. The brothers came back during dinner, and dinner is exactly when I wanted them. They dented the window again. Villa 5, Row 3, the Jianing international boss and his brother, big talkers, small men, and I went out to meet them. I didn't need a gun for the opening act. I punched the tall one off his feet and put the fat one down under my boot and explained in the reasonable tone of a man discussing a parking dispute that they were going to give me 1,000,000 yuan and then leave and never come back. They paid. Greed does listen when it's face down in the snow. Then the tall one got clever, which is always fatal. He stood up, brushed off, and offered, all friendly now, to buy my snowmobile. 2 million. A generous number, a number designed to get me to open my door with my guard down. And when I did, they swung baseball bats at my head. I put a crossbow bolt through the fat brother's throat and had the 1911 on the tall one before the second bat finished its arc. I took the rest of his money too, another 1.2 million, because why leave it? And I let him talk, let him promise revenge, let him say the thing about Sule, the thing about what he'd do to my wife once I was dead, and then I stopped listening to him permanently. Both of them went into the space to be dealt with later. Neither of them got up. 2 men had made Sule hide in the dark. That debt was paid in full, in the only coin the apocalypse honors. Sule saw the whole thing, and I had to teach her the new rules right there in the snow. She'd watched me kill 2 men. She stared at the pistol in my hand like it was a snake I'd been hiding, and the first thing out of her mouth was about police, about consequences, about the world she'd woken up in 3 days ago and hadn't fully let go of yet. There's no police, I told her gently, because gentle was still what she needed, even for hard truths. There's no law. There's no one coming to sort out who was right. There's just people who can protect what's theirs and people who can't. Might is the only rule now. Believe in me, believe in yourself, and believe in nothing else. I nodded at the dented window. Those men came for you. That's what the world is now. I'd rather you understand it than be surprised by it. She took it in. She was stronger than she looked. I keep having to relearn that. And by the time we went back inside, she'd stopped shaking. I reinforced the windows with the heavy bulletproof glass, 400,000 yuan of it, and salted the yard with pinhole cameras. Then, because I am who I am, I doubled the group chat prices and blacklisted a fresh round of loudmouths. Next door, Wu Mei heard the gunshots through the wall. And in her story, the one where a song assassin lived beside her, gunfire meant the countdown had reached 0. She sat in her cold house that night, certain her turn was next, certain the professional next door was working his way toward her, and she despaired in a way I wouldn't learn about until much later. Same wall. 2 different apocalypses. I really did need to fix that. Just as soon as I finished getting rich, armed, and slightly infamous. Business, it turned out, was booming, and the customers were a parade of my future. The big buyers started finding harmony brings wealth, and I recognized nearly every one of them because I'd watched this city sort itself into powers and corpses once already. There was young Master Ma Lin, a genuine rich second-generation kid trapped in a villa at the back of the compound, buying close to 1,000,000 yuan of supplies because his father, for all his money, couldn't get a helicopter into the sky. There was a grain of dust, the biggest internet celebrity in the region, foxy-eyed and famous, holed up in Building 16, dropping 300,000 like it was nothing. And then there was Chen Jing. She messaged the alt account herself. Didn't recognize me. Why would she? Harmony Brings Wealth was just a name, and immediately started flirting for a discount, the old reliable weapon, while somewhere in frame behind her, Lin Shan sat starving and pale and seething. It took everything I had not to type something that would give the whole game away. Instead, I did the crueler thing. I was warm. I was accommodating. I strung her along, hinted at a deal, and made her come down in person to pick it up, made her put on her coat and walk out into the killing cold to grovel for noodles from a stranger who was, in fact, the dog she'd stabbed. She stood there in the group chat debating whether it was even worth buying, worried the money would be wasted when order returned. Order wasn't returning, Chen Jing, but by all means, come get your noodles. Sule caught me at the horde and finally, fully, stopped worrying. She was still on her stop-selling campaign. She'd done reading, my studious wife, and she came at me armed with geology. The money will be worthless, she said. This isn't a cold snap, it's an ice age. Do you know how long those last? The Quaternary, the Permian? Hundreds of thousands of years. Millions. You can't outsell a million years. She was scared for me. She thought I was a clever man about to be left holding a fortune in paper that the world had stopped honoring. So I showed her. I told her I already understood about the shelter, about the species plan, that I didn't even blame the officials for it, and then I took her down to the basement and opened it up, materialized it. Rack after rack, floor to ceiling, rice and water and oil and meat and fuel, more than the two of us could eat in 10 lifetimes, appearing out of what she thought was empty space. She went very quiet. Then she understood, all at once, that the man she'd bet everything on wasn't gambling, that whatever the money did, we personally were never going to be hungry or cold again. Something in her let go completely. After that, she stopped trying to protect me from my own plan. She'd realized the plan didn't need protecting. I ran the plaza market like a king holding court because that's exactly what it was. The safe passage under Taoyuan Square became my storefront, and I made people line up for it. I made them wait. There was a shivering old man with frozen pipes begging me to just cook him a bowl of noodles. I knew that face too. The future would grow something ugly out of it, so I let him wait with everyone else. There was a would-be do-gooder trying to organize fairness. I snubbed him. And there, in the line, was Chen Jing, come to collect, begging me for a free camp stove, getting nothing but a cold smile and a place at the back. Still not knowing, the man refusing her was the one she'd murdered. The crowd recognized a grain of dust. Hard to hide a face that famous. And things got a little charged. So I escorted her personally back to Building 16. Partly because she'd bought a mountain of goods, mostly because I'd spotted 3 men in the corner of the lobby watching her the way wolves watch a limping deer. I warned her off the elevator too. Power was unreliable, cables could snap, and I knew this building's future better than its architect. She didn't argue. People were starting to learn that when the man from Harmony Brings Wealth told you which way not to go, you listened. 3 men in the corner though, those I'd have to handle. Some threats you can leave in a line. Some you have to walk up 22 flights of stairs to meet. The 3 men were a stalker and his pack, and the 22 flights were where I stopped pretending to be harmless. Her name, it turned out, was Chen Yu. That was the real name behind A Grain of Dust, and the man leading the 3, plus a handful more waiting up the stairwell, was Sun Yang. An obsessed superfan she'd once had to report to the police, back when police existed. He'd been waiting for a world with no rules to collect what he thought he was owed, and he'd brought 6 friends to help him do something to her I'm not going to describe because it isn't going to happen on my watch, and it doesn't deserve the words. I played the coward first, hands up, nervous, just a delivery guy, don't mind me, right up until I was close enough. Then I had Sun Yang's arm twisted up behind his back and a cigarette cherry against the corner of his eye, and the negotiation was very short. When one of his friends charged me with a knife, a crossbow bolt ended his participation, and the rest of the pack discovered urgent business elsewhere. I spared Sun Yang, bleeding, blind in one eye, extremely educated, on the condition that he clean up the mess and dump the body. A man that thoroughly broken makes a very obedient dog, and I'd noticed, in the market for dogs, the loyal kind, the kind I used to be. Chen Yu stood at the top of the stairs looking at the man who just walked through 7 attackers to reach her, and I watched her decide something about me that I hadn't asked her to decide. Chen Yu decided the thing women in these stories decide, and she decided it fast. Inside her apartment, still shaking off the fear, she looked at me with her whole heart in her eyes and more or less offered herself on the spot. Grateful, enamored, an internet celebrity whose entire audience was men and who had just been saved from the worst of them by one who wanted, apparently, nothing. We flirted. There was a whole bit where she offered me a cigarette, being coy, and I responded by gravely gifting her a pack of sanitary pads from the machine, which broke the tension into pieces and made her laugh until she couldn't breathe. I'll give you one line about the rest and no more. A call from young Master Ma came in before anything could happen, and I answered it because business waits for no romance. I left her a mountain of supplies and a bag of fresh, unfrozen fruit, a miracle in a frozen city, and she pressed her real name on me like a gift. Chen Yu, make sure you remember it. I did not, particularly. She wasn't moving into the villa, and I had 100 names to keep straight and only room in my head for the ones that mattered yet. But she'd remember mine. That was the point. Young Master Ma's phone call came with a family tragedy attached, which is how I learned exactly how doomed everyone was. Ma Lin's father, Old Li, a serious man with serious money, was inside the shelter. The Wang family had helped fund the thing, and even so, when it came down to it, the people running the shelter chose to prioritize a truckload of supplies over sending a helicopter to pull the man's own son out of a frozen city. That's how bad the numbers were. That's how completely the old world's rules had died. Money that could build a doomsday ark couldn't buy one seat home. The extinction estimate Ma Lin repeated to me, hollow, was 98%. His father had wired him 100 million yuan and one instruction: buy everything, survive, I'll come for you if I can. So I made 2 acquisitions that day. I sold Ma Lin the beginnings of his survival and cemented an ally who had 100 million reasons to like me. And I made Sun Yang, my newly blinded, newly obedient stalker, my first proper henchman, paid in noodles and ham to guard Chen Yu's door. He'd already seen my gun. He was thoroughly, permanently cowed. He even messaged Chen Yu to introduce himself as her protector, which was really a polite way of warning every other man off her. My dog, marking my territory. I was building a kennel, and business was good. Then Ma Lin bought 20 million yuan of supplies in one sale, and my magic box nearly sang. He wanted everything: food, water, stoves, insulation, glass, quilts, firewood, seafood, the works for his villa and his people, and he paid 20 million for the load without haggling. Before I dragged the sacks over, I treated myself a silent level 5 snowmobile upgrade. The model, whose description cheerfully noted it was perfect for murder and robbery, vanishes without a trace, which is the kind of customer review that tells you a lot about the machine's intended audience. And the level 8 windbreaker I'd been eyeing since day one, thin as a summer shirt, breathable, and it kept me warm and comfortable at -60. I'd been bundled like a mummy for a week. Now I could walk through the apocalypse dressed like I was going to brunch. Ma Lin tried to sweeten the deal by offering me 3 of his internet celebrity girlfriends. I declined. Brothers are hands and feet, I told him, quoting the old line back at him. Women are just clothes. Which is a coarse thing to say and not really how I feel, but it's the language a man like Ma Lin trusts, and the 20 million had been enough of a gift for one afternoon. That single sale was going to push the machine most of the way to level 10. Level 10. The fruits. Power, tonight if I was lucky. I stayed and drank with Ma Lin, and I made a brother, which is a thing I hadn't had since the last one froze my legs to the ground. I installed his glass and his insulation and taught him the after-sales the way I taught everyone, and then we drank, and Ma Lin, loosened up, grateful, young, nearly spilled a shelter secret or 2 before catching himself. He'd heard the same numbers I had. The officials writing off the public, 98 out of 100, the quiet machinery of who gets saved and who gets used. He didn't have the whole picture. Neither did I yet. But we could both feel the shape of it, this enormous cold thing moving under the surface of every official statement, and there was something almost comforting about sharing the dread with someone. From now on, Ma Lin said, sloppy and sincere, arm around my shoulder, you're my brother. His 3 women joined us, and the night got warm and loud, and I let myself have it, one evening of being somebody's brother without waiting for the knife. I'd learn whether he meant it. Everyone gets tested eventually, but that night I chose just a little to hope he'd pass. I hit level 10, reached for the fruit, and the machine slammed a door in my face for 24 hours. With the 20 million I bought a spree, more windbreakers, submachine guns, landmines, the good stuff level 9 had unlocked, and the experience bar filled and rolled over. Level 9 then, gloriously, level 10. This was it. This was the whole climb. I opened the catalog and went straight for the ability fruit, 1 million yuan, finally unlocked, finally mine, system upgrading, 24-hour countdown, reward upon completion. And the space locked, sealed shut. 2 in the morning to 2 in the morning, a full day, and everything inside, my guns, my mines, my murder snowmobile, my entire arsenal, was trapped in there with it, out of reach. The machine had walked me all the way up the mountain and then, at the summit, told me to come back tomorrow. Even at level 10, even with everything paid, the power was 1 more day away. The system was never, ever going to let me stop feeling the pressure. Cool, very cool. I went home unarmed, except for the 2 1911s I'd had the sense to keep on my body, slightly drunk, smelling of Ma Lin's warm, loud villa. Which is how Sule found a long red hair on my collar. She didn't say anything. She was too smart to say anything. but I watched her file it, the perfume, the red hair, the late warm night, and quietly resolve something behind her eyes. She wasn't going to fight me about it. She was going to outmaneuver it. If other women were going to orbit her husband, she'd decided, then she would be the one who controlled the orbit. And her first move, though I didn't know it yet, was going to be to bring the Yang sisters into this house herself. My wife was scarier than most of my enemies. I was so proud. The next morning, Chen Jing called to beg for me back, and I ate breakfast while she did it, because timing is everything in comedy. I'd made a spread, pan-fried buns, wontons, the last of a lobster, and I made sure to take the call on camera, chewing, steam rising off the food, while 2 floors of a frozen city watched a starving woman try to talk her way back into a warm kitchen. Chen Jing had rediscovered how much she missed me. She was so sorry. She'd made a mistake. Lin Shan meant nothing. Couldn't we start over? Okay, I said, mouth full. The speed of her relief was almost sad, but I wasn't done. Prove it, I said. You're at Lin Shan's place, right? Have Sule film you saying it. She's there with you, isn't she? Which was a trap with 3 floors, because Sule was of course sitting right beside me buttering a bun, so Chen Jing, scrambling, had to invent a reason her rival couldn't come to the phone, while off camera I watched Lin Shan's shadow lean in to coach her lies in a frantic whisper, the 2 of them building a story together, not knowing I could see the whole set. I let them dig. I'm patient like that now. I used to be patient because I was kind. Now I'm patient because I enjoy the view. Then Lin Shan made a move so desperate and so ugly that even I sat up, because it involved a girl he'd already ruined once. He wanted into my warm house. He'd figured out that harmony brings wealth was the only game in the city, and that Sule had landed somewhere warm, and his plan to get there ran through his own past. There was a girl, a skier, provincial level, genuinely devoted to him. He'd gotten her pregnant once, and then made her end it with a mouthful of promises, and she still loved him anyway, the way the badly treated sometimes do. Lin Shan's brilliant idea was to send this girl out into the blizzard to rescue Sule and deliver her back to him. Chen Jing found out the old friend was one of Lin Shan's lovers and clawed his face open over it. He shoved her down. She caved because they were bound together now by mutual need and mutual contempt. Meanwhile, I saw a use for all of it. I wanted to know something, whether any woman could really be that loyal to a man that worthless, and I wanted to test it without risking Sule. So we set up a decoy. Sule called a former colleague, a woman named Manhwa, and arranged for Manhwa to impersonate Sule for the skier's pickup. A fake wife, sent to meet a discarded lover, dispatched by a cheating dead man walking, watched by me. And though none of us knew it yet, watched by one more person, Hao Ji, the boss whose pinky I'd removed, lurking, catching sight of Manhwa taking the call. I raised the group price again while I set it up. 2,000 a noodle now. The property manager shilled for me in the chat like a paid hype man, which he sort of was. Then the snow started killing people who drank it, and I refused to warn a single soul, and I want you to understand why. It came through the group chat first, panic, then grief. People who'd run out of bottled water had done the obvious thing and melted snow to drink, and now they were dying of it. Not slowly. Vomiting. Collapsing. Gone. It confirmed the worst piece of knowledge I carried out of my first life. The snow was poison. I never touched it. I showered in bottled mineral water like a lunatic, and I never once let a flake of that stuff past my lips. And now I knew, again, that I was right. I could have warned them. One message: don't drink the snow. It would have cost me nothing and saved dozens. I didn't. Instead, I sold medicine. Overpriced, of course. Laxatives at 50,000, emetics at 80, antibiotics at 100, to the ones already poisoned, like a woman whose father was dying and who paid whatever I asked. Old Lee accused me and the local doctor of colluding to profit off the dying, and he wasn't entirely wrong. I know how that lands. But I'd been the man who gave freely once. I'd shared my last supplies and my whole soft heart and gotten a knife for it. The world had shown me exactly what it does to generosity, and I decided to stop being its example. If that makes me a villain, then the world made me one betrayal at a time, and it can send the bill to Lin Shan. The poison did do one useful thing. It flushed out 2 people worth keeping. The first was a doctor. Autumn Leaf, she called herself in the group. Really Elder Wen, an emergency room director under 30, foreign-trained gold-rimmed glasses, the competent kind of calm. She offered medical help in exchange for food. Her husband, a lab researcher, was unreachable and almost certainly dead. The hospital's supplies were gone, its staff poisoned by the same snow as everyone else. I looked at her and I didn't see charity. I saw an asset, a real doctor, the person you want on hand for a household that intended to grow, for the children I intended to have. I started thinking about how to acquire her. The second was a strategist, though he came disguised as a nobody. A humble young man named Han Bo from a used car family showed up at the market wanting to bulk buy and resell, a small operator with a sharp eye, except I knew that face. In my first life, Han Bo became Liu Kai's genius strategist, the mind that talked Song into consolidating the whole North and setting his rivals at each other's throats. The man who engineered half of Liu Kai's rise was standing in my supply line asking for a discount. The Song family was not getting him this time. I was. Meanwhile, back home, Su Lei was running her own quiet campaign, using my old phone to add Wu Mei on WeChat, laying the groundwork to bring the sisters in on her own terms. Everyone in my life was scheming. I'd raised a household of operators. I couldn't have been happier about it. I hired Han Bo by testing his eyes, and he passed without knowing he'd sat an exam. I sold him the bulk lot, $500,000, and before we settled, I asked him to guess the stock. Just eyeball it. He did, and he was exact, down to the case. The man could count a warehouse with a glance. So I gave him a dagger, made him a paid outside dealer for Harmony Brings Wealth, and pocketed the fact that Liu Kai's future brain was now on my payroll and didn't even know he'd switched teams. Then I went to see the property manager, old Wang, and I was ruthless in the plain way. I told him he was done. Han Bo ran sales now, and that prices doubled tomorrow. Wang was broke. He'd sunk his savings into a mortgage and his wife's brother's wedding, and now the world had ended and his one connection to food was firing him. He begged. I stayed cold. His wife was a woman named Jo Lan, a face from my school days, a crush I'd carried and never spoken to, married now to this tired, broken man. I felt the old pull and I shut it in a drawer. I wasn't in the business of taking married women off desperate husbands. I was in the business of owning the market. Wang could keep his wife. He just couldn't keep his job. Cruel? Sure. But every yuan I squeezed was a yuan feeding the box that was going to keep my people alive. I'd made my peace with being the hard hand. Somebody in this city was going to hold the food. Might as well be the one who remembered where the knives came from. Then I cracked the ability fruit puzzle, and it made me want to buy every houseplant in the city. The power was going to fail on day 15. I knew that. Superhumans, freshly hatched, fighting over the first fruits, tearing through the underground cables in the process. Chaos. But the fruits themselves had a rule I'd never understood the first time, and I found it in a stairwell in Building 16. A tiny green plant, alive, in a patch the snow hadn't reached. Snow-free. Everything buried under the poison snow died. Only the plants that stayed dry, indoors sheltered, those mutated. Those grew fruit. Which meant my 3 pothos pots, warm and dry in Villa 4, were sitting on gold. And it meant every houseplant in every heated apartment in this city was a lottery ticket that its owner didn't know they were holding. So I gave Sun Yang a new job, quietly build a crew, and buy up everyone's houseplants. Trade them noodles for the sad little ferns on their windowsills, the desk pothos, the lucky bamboo, all of it, into my hands. Nobody would blink. Who hoards houseplants at the end of the world? A madman, or a man who knows which madness pays. Meanwhile, 2 traps were being built in the dark, and only one of them was mine. Mine was gentle. Su Lei messaged Wu Mei, plain as day, "Would you and your sister be willing to become my husband's women?" Wu Mei, next door, freezing, reading this on my old phone, nearly dropped it. She still thought Liu Kai's spy lived next door. Now the spy's wife was recruiting her into a household. She had no idea the spy was the neighbor she'd lent an umbrella. The other trap was Lin Shan's, and it had teeth. His real plan, the one he whispered to Chen Jing, was old-fashioned murder. Chen Jing would seduce me, get me alone, shout a code word. Lin Shan would rush in and kill me and take the villa. And in the fine print of his own head, once it worked, he'd dump Chen Jing too. Everyone at that man's table was planning to eat everyone else. The skier, Ding Lin, was already skiing through the blizzard toward the decoy. Hao Ji was already following Manhwa with a club. 3 schemes, one night, all converging, and I could see every camera. Chen Jing played the last card in the deck. She told me she was pregnant. She came on video that night and knelt and cried and swore the baby was mine, that she'd made a terrible mistake, that she couldn't do this without me, that I couldn't abandon my own child. It was a good performance. She'd always been good, and I sat there and pretended to buy every tear of it, softening, wavering, the old soft dog resurfacing for her benefit, and then I named my price. "Fine," I said, "for the baby, but Lin Shan's gone. Him or me, choose." I wasn't wavering. I was planting a bomb between them. It went off beautifully. Lin Shan, listening in, understood exactly what I was doing and turned on Chen Jing for entertaining it, slapped her, the first time I'd ever seen him do it, threatened to expose their whole affair if she wobbled. Then they reconciled, the way people do when they need each other and hate each other in equal measure, each one privately deciding to betray the other the instant they got inside my walls. A pregnant lie, a jealous slap, 2 murderers holding hands. I turned off the camera and went to bed. The trap they were building for me was going to catch them instead. It always does, when you let people build their own. I baited the last part of the trap myself with my address and a dead battery. I got theatrical. On camera, I bathed in bottled mineral water, a grotesque flex now that water ran 3,000 a bottle, and let it slip, casual, where I lived. Row 2, I said, vague enough to be a hunt, specific enough to be a promise. And then I made my phone die, right in the middle of the conversation. Gone. That was the hook. Now the starving couple had a warm villa to find and no way to call ahead, and the only thing between them and it was a night in the killing cold. I wanted them to come. My cameras were charged even if my phone wasn't. Come knock on some doors, Lin Shan. See what row 2 has waiting. While that seed grew, the skier reached the city. Ding Lin, provincial skier, the girl Lin Shan had gotten pregnant and talked into an abortion with a fistful of lies, had skied a full kilometer through a blizzard to rescue a Sule, who was really Manhwa in a borrowed name. Devotion like that is a kind of illness. And limping along behind her, club in hand, came Hao Jie, the boss short one Pinky, nursing his hate for the man who took it, following the fake wife toward whatever she was walking into. Hao Jie took the rescue apart, and a woman who should have lived didn't. He caught up to Manhwa at the company, and he was cleverer than I'd given him credit for. He exposed the name swap on the spot, showed Ding Lin the personnel photos, proved this wasn't Sule, proved Sule was married and long gone, and that Lin Shan had lied to her about all of it. The skier's whole reason for being there collapsed in an instant, and Hao Ji, sensing an ally in freshly made rage, pitched her a new plan. Forget the rescue. Let's go kill Lin Shan together. He showed her his missing pinky as proof of grievance. They took the coat and the supplies, and when Manhwa, poor decoy Manhwa, who'd only agreed to help a friend, tried to hold on, Hao Ji made sure she couldn't follow. I'll say it the way it deserves, and no more than that. He left her in the snow, and she didn't get up, and he skied off into the white with Ding Lin beside him. I felt that one. Manhwa wasn't supposed to be in any of this. She was a favor a friend called in, and my scheme put her in the path of a man I'd made dangerous by taking his finger. In the old life, Hao Ji froze to death, harmless. A footnote. I'd changed that. I'd kept him alive and angry, and it cost a woman who'd done nothing but answer her phone. I don't get to pretend that one was clean. I added it to the list of things I owed, in the column that doesn't get paid back. Only carried. The coast kept trying to tell me something, and someone kept deleting the message. While Hao Ji played caring rescuer to seduce his new jilted skier, a whole slow performance, also he could someday parade her in front of Lin Shan, I did what I do at night. I read the news between the lines, and I caught it, a headline about the Chinese coastline flashing up and then vanishing. Shocking, something on the beach at, and then, minutes later, the previous report was untrue and has been deleted. Over and over, something was happening at the shore, something the army split off to handle, something big enough to scrub from the record in real time. I didn't have the piece yet, but I could feel its weight. The shelter, the species plan, the coast, Penglai, 98% Sao. It all pointed at one enormous fact, sitting just past the edge of what I could see. I sold Elder Wen some overpriced children's medicine, watched people in the group barter houseplants for pills without knowing what they were trading away, and kept turning the coast over in my mind. Snow was the opening act. Whatever was on that beach was the show, and I intended to be strong enough to survive the curtain. Wu Mei finally said yes, and she said it the way a cornered animal says anything, to make the fear stop. Sule closed her like a professional. She sent photos, herself bathing in hot water, doing a face mask, sitting down to a feast, and set them beside the reality of Wu Mei's cold, dark, hungry basement 2 walls away. Then she played the last card. She revealed that Harmony Brings Wealth, the only supplier in the city, was her husband, and that a word from him could blacklist Wu Mei from every scrap of food left in Jiangcheng. Wu Mei broke, starving, her little sister starving beside her. She agreed. I'll be obedient, she said. Just spare my sister. She's young. Don't drag her into anything. She thought she was submitting to a warlord. She was, a little. Sule kept the wind quiet, working the whole thing off my old phone, and kept Gao Ting in the dark and curious, and the beautiful tragedy underneath it all still stood. Wu Mei believed to her bones that a song assassin lived next door. She was agreeing to become the woman of the very stranger she'd been terrified of. She just hadn't seen his face yet. Then the whole clockwork collided at midnight, and it played like a farce written by a cruel god. I found Sule's entire scheme laid out on the phone, the recruiting, the Yang sisters, all of it, and I wasn't angry, moved, honestly. She confessed she'd done it because of the red hair, because she'd rather build the harem herself than watch it happen to her. My terrifying practical wife, defending her marriage by expanding it. Meanwhile, Chen Jing and Lin Shan, baited by my fake address and my dead phone, were out in the freezing dark, going villa to villa on row 2, knocking, hunting me. And they reached the door of villa number 3, which is Wu Mei's. I was next door in number 4. Wu Mei, already convinced Liu Kai's people were coming to break in, looked through her peephole and saw 2 figures wrapped head to toe in blankets against the cold, standing at her door in the middle of the night, and completely lost her nerve. She was sure it was them. The Song men. Come at last. She called Su Lei, begging, "Come save me, there are people outside my door." And at that exact moment my phone lit up with a text from Chen Jing, freezing on a stranger's doorstep. "I'm at Villa 3, Row 2, West Side. Where are you? 4 schemes, 1 dark street, every wire crossed." I sat in my warm house holding the only complete picture, and I have to tell you, I laughed until it hurt. Then I stood up to go collect what all this scheming had delivered to my doorstep. I took Chen Jing's call one last time, and I used it to close the account. She was freezing in the passage outside Wu Mei's door, Lin Shan hiding somewhere in the dark nearby, and she video called me begging, still playing the pregnant penitent. I let her finish, then I laid it all out, flat and quiet. "Lin Shan's standing right next to you. Su Lei isn't with you. She never was. And you're not pregnant. You made that up too." I watched the performance drain out of her face in real time. "You chose Lin Shan, so we're nothing. I wish you two a long happy life together. Goodbye." I hung up. No shouting, no speech about betrayal, just a door closing so softly she'd hear it forever. The dog she'd told to be a good boy and die had just wished her happiness and blocked her number. That's the version of revenge I like, not the knife. The absence of one. Then Lin Shan called Su Lei's phone, and I answered it, and I broke something in him I don't think ever healed. He was suspicious, of course he was, so he called her directly to check, and I picked up. Low voice, warm, intimate. "She's tired," I told him. "She's already fallen asleep." And I let that sit. You have to understand what that did to him. Lin Shan had dated Su Lei for 6 months and never once touched her. She'd kept that boundary the whole time, and it had eaten at him. And now here was a man's voice, in the dark, telling him she was asleep, in a tone that answered every ugly question he'd never let himself ask out loud. He came apart. Half mad, he stormed off toward home. Chen Jing trailed after him, and the 2 of them walked back into the cold, each secretly rehearsing how to sell the other one out to me first. Somewhere across the city, Ding Lin was ignoring Lin Shan's frantic calls, already gone with Hao Jie. Everyone was leaving Lin Shan. It was a good look on him. Then I opened my door and gathered up the household my enemies had spent all night delivering. I made a show of driving off the intruders at Villa 3 for Wu Mei's benefit, so she'd think the spy next door had saved her rather than orchestrated the whole night. Then I collected the Yang sisters and walked them next door to Villa 4. I knocked. Su Lei opened it and said, warm as a hearth, "Welcome home." The sisters just stared. Wu Mei, who'd spent 2 weeks terrified of the professional next door, who'd nearly gone back to Liu Kai over him, was looking at the man she'd lent an umbrella to on the first day of the apocalypse. The neighbor, the debtor hunter, him. And little Gao Ting, who'd hidden in the back of the SUV to catch a spy, was standing in the luxury villa her own sister had renovated for her, watching a fake wife induct her into a real household. Su Lei took charge like a general, staked her rank as first wife, gently but unmistakably put the bratty Gao Ting in her place over kitchen duties, and folded the sisters into the machine of the house. Wu Mei bathed in hot water for the first time in 2 weeks and cried quietly at how good it felt to be warm. "I'll give you the single line I give these nights. 2 adults. A decision made freely once the fear was gone. A door closed. Afterward she offered, unprompted, already thinking like a member of the household, to introduce her beautiful widowed friend too. Everyone in my life kept trying to give me more people to protect. I was running out of reasons to say no. Over dinner I dropped a truth that turned Wu Mei's grief into a target. It was a feast, the whole strange new family around one table, and the sisters wanted the story of how I'd taken this villa, so I told a version. "Lin Shan stole my home," I said, "so I took his woman, and I took this villa. Fair trade." Which got a laugh and also happened to be true, but then Wu Mei mentioned her late husband's name, Chen Bo, and the pieces I'd been carrying since the military camp locked into place. Her husband was Liu Kai's brother, the one who died in a car accident. And I knew, because I'd heard it through a wall in 2 murderers' own voices, that it was no accident. Wang Peng killed Chen Bo so Liu Kai could take the family. I told her, gently as I could, but I told her, that the accident was a murder, that her brother-in-law had her husband killed to inherit, that the man who'd wanted to make her a concubine had made her a widow first. She went still in a way that was worse than crying, and I made her a promise, out loud, meaning it. The Song family would answer for it. I didn't say I'll kill Liu Kai. That debt would take longer than one night to collect. I said he'd answer, and privately I thanked the dead man, because Chenbo's murder was the thing that had put Wu Mei on my side of the wall. Understand your enemy, become him, surpass him. I was getting very good at all three. The system countdown ticked in the corner of my mind. 15 minutes to the upgrade. Lin Shan got his second gut punch of the night, and my machine finally handed me the keys to power. He'd made it home and smashed his television in a rage. Then, needing to hurt someone the way he hurt, he called Ding Lin, the skier, his old devoted lover, his fallback. And Hao Jie answered her phone. Low voice, warm. She's tired, she's already fallen asleep. The exact same line. The exact same wound, twice in one night, from two different men, about two different women he thought were his. I hadn't planned that part. The universe just has a sense of humor, and that night, it was on my side. Lin Shan broke further, and he and Chen Jing bound themselves together as murder allies, each still privately planning to sell the other out. Chen Jing's last groveling video went unanswered, blocked. Somewhere in there she stopped wanting me back and started wanting me dead. Fine, get in line. And then, at 2 in the morning exactly, the machine finished. Upgrade complete. The little 6 cubic meter closet behind my eyes wasn't little anymore. It blew open, past 200 cubic meters toward 1,000, a warehouse now, a hangar. The machine itself looked sleeker, prouder. There was a gift waiting in the delivery port, and a new line of text I'd never seen before, glowing soft and patient. The machine could now read my body's attributes. The fruit was finally in reach. The pressure was finally about to become power. I went to open the port. Level 10 came with a stat sheet, and raising it hurt exactly as much as the machine warned. The gift in the port could wait a second. First, there was the new panel, the machine reading my body and laying it out like a game character. Strength, stamina, speed, endurance, each one capped by the machine's level, each one raisable for 100,000 yuan a point. So I bought points. And here's the part the description had buried in polite language. It grows painfully. It was not a metaphor. Every point poured into my body felt like it was rebuilding me from the marrow out, and I gritted my teeth and bought more. And at some stage of it, endurance costs 1,000,000 yuan a point, by the way. The body does not like being upgraded. I made a noise. A loud, undignified, this is agony noise. And Gao Ting, passing in the hall, heard her sister's new man howling behind a door, cracked it open to see if he was dying, and caught me mid-upgrade clutching myself with a measuring ruler somehow involved in the diagnostics. She shrieked. She fled. We did not speak of it. Some things you carry to the grave. Then I opened the port. The gift was an ability fruit. Free. My first one. No 1,000,000 yuan price tag. A little congratulations from the machine for making it this far. I ate it, and something formed low in my abdomen, a small golden core, warm, settling into the exact spot where a knife had once put my first life out. The furnace was lit again. This time nobody was getting close enough to touch it. My power came back as fire, and this time it came back mean. Last life, I awakened fire, and it kept me alive for 3 cold months before it wasn't enough. This time, the fruit gave me the same element and a much bigger version of it. Volcanic rock flame, the system called it. Fire that could burn on bare stone. Fire the wind couldn't blow out. For a few minutes at a stretch, I could go full torch, a walking bonfire, and even when I wasn't lit, it hardened me. More defense, more strength, a body upgraded twice over now. In a frozen world, being a man who is himself warm is not a small thing. It's nearly a cheat on top of a cheat. Then I learned the machine's cruelest little rule about fruits. It only sells 1 per level. 1. Eating a second fruit at the same level doesn't give you a new power. It just deepens the fire, and even that takes 2 fruits to move up a rank. The machine wanted me climbing forever, always 1 purchase short of enough. I hoarded the spare fruit I had. Time freezes inside the space, so it'd keep, and I stood there a while debating whether to give it to Su Lei. She'd earned a power more than anyone. I filed the decision and started planning the next moves. Recruit Grand Elder Lao, the one decent man from my old life. Keep Sun Yang and Han Bo on their leashes. Take Tao Yuan, then Jiang Qing, then whatever came after. A man with fire in his belly and a warehouse behind his eyes can afford to think big. In the morning, I turned down a saint and armed my wife, and both were the same lesson. Wu Mei wanted to bring in her friend, the doctor, Elder Wen, the good one who healed for free, and I said no, flatly. No saints in this house. I'd watched sanctimony get people killed last time. The world we lived in now had no patience for someone who'd give away the last dose to a stranger while her own people went without. Pity was a luxury with a body count. I wasn't paying it. Then I did the other half of the lesson. I gave Su Lei the 2 Walther PPKs I'd been holding back, and I told her plainly what they were for. Not for looters. For the Yang sisters. If either of them ever betrays this house while I'm away, I said, you end it. You don't wait for me. I gave my first wife the authority to kill the newest members of the family, and I meant it, and she took the guns and understood. It sounds monstrous. It's just honest. In a house built on need instead of trust, somebody has to hold the guarantee, and I'd rather it be the one person who'd handed me everything on day one. I told her again what was true. She was first, she'd stay first, and when the time came, a fruit was hers. She believed me. She was right too. The plaza market turned into a riot, and I'd been half waiting for it. I'd restructured the whole operation. Han Bo as sole community dealer now, running a pickup truck, noodles at 5,000 a brick, all private trading banned, and every houseplant in the compound quietly bought up on my orders. Clean, profitable, mine. Han Bo ran it beautifully, which made sense. In the old life, this same man ran a warlord's entire economy. I gave him supplies and children's medicine to seal his loyalty and let him work. Then the crowd remembered it was a crowd. A 300-pound contractor named Hu Liang came down on the market with 30 men carrying knives. They killed one of Sun Yang's people. They cut Han Bo across the back. And the 1,000-odd residents who'd been standing in line watching, the hungry, desperate mass of them, took it as a signal and surged the truck. All of it going wrong at once. A strongman with a mob of blades, a strategist bleeding on the ice, 1,000 starving people deciding that today was the day they just took what they wanted. I watched it break open from the edge of the plaza, and I felt the cold, still things settle over me again. They wanted to see what the man who owned the food actually was. Fine. Class was in session. I stopped the riot the only way a riot stops, and I won't pretty it up. I shot Hu Liang first, pistol, clean, and the 300-pound problem stopped being a problem. Then, when the mob didn't stop, when 1,000 people kept surging the truck like the food was worth more than the warning, I brought out the rifle I'd been saving for a day exactly this bad, and I made the point in the language the apocalypse actually understands. It was fast, and it was ugly, and a lot of people who decided to become looters that morning did not get to go home. I'm not going to walk you through it. The result is the whole of it. The surge broke, the plaza went silent, and the survivors stood very still. Then I made them give everything back. Every stolen brick of noodles, every jug of water, searched and returned, item by item, while they kept their eyes on the ground. And I finished it by finishing Hu Liang properly, in front of all of them, so the lesson had a period at the end of it. Then I said the only rule that was ever going to matter here. Pay and trade fair, and you eat. Take what isn't yours and you don't. That's the whole law now. There isn't another one. Nobody argued. You could have heard the snow land. I hated that I was good at this. I did it anyway. Somewhere under the cold I could still feel the soft man who'd have shared his last noodle. I just kept him locked in the same drawer as everything else that used to get me killed. The riot did hand me my best soldier though, and a small piece of my own future. One of Sun Yang's men had stood his ground when the blades came, hadn't run, hadn't flinched, put himself between the mob and the truck. Ren Dong, ex-soldier, dumped by a fiancé who'd cheated while he served. All that betrayal turned into a very steady spine. I promoted him on the spot to Sun Yang's deputy and handed the rifle to Sun Yang to carry, which told both of them exactly where they stood. Ren Dong was the real thing. I'd known men like him last life. I'd usually watch them die for people who didn't deserve them. Not this time. And in the crowd, I spotted a young nurse, Li Qian, though I only half remembered the name, and spared her the search, gave her food, let her go. No agenda. Sometimes you plant a kindness and don't check why. She mattered to someone I cared about in a future she didn't know she had. Then Chen Jing appeared, because of course she did, and tried the old key one more time, sidled up to Brother Shen, all sweet to wheedle free supplies. I slapped the routine right out of her, publicly, and doubled her price on the spot. She peeled off and went to work on Sun Yang instead, adding him on WeChat, sinking one rung lower. Sun Yang took the bait. Han Bo, watching, refused to comp her so much as a noodle, and just like that, the first crack opened between my strategist and my thug. Good. Rivalry keeps dogs sharp. I let it breathe. Then I went and dug an old man out of the snow, and it was the best thing I did in either life. Grand Elder Lao, the security guard from my first go-round, the one man who'd been kind to me for no reason at all, twice, and gotten nothing back but a frozen death in a world that didn't notice. His gatehouse was buried. I sent the snow robot ahead, and it smashed his door clean off, which is the robot's one talent. And there he was, alive, older than I'd let myself remember, tougher than he had any right to be. I gave him a fruit, just handed it over, for loyalty I hadn't even asked him to prove, because I owed this man across a lifetime he didn't remember living. He ate it and awakened strength, real strength, the kind that punches a hole in a load-bearing wall on the first try and looks faintly embarrassed about the mess. And that's when the quiet man told me who he actually was, and I had to sit down. Grandpa Elder wasn't a grandpa. Elder Yiming, barely into his 40s under the gray, ex-special forces, years as a mercenary in Africa after. A man who'd done things in service to a country that then had no more use for him and drifted into a gatehouse to be gentle to strangers because the alternative was to be nothing. He carried it well, carried it all the way down to the tragedy he only said once, "Lo, not looking at me, a wife taken and killed, a daughter he'd pushed away to keep safe, somewhere off in Tianhai, who wouldn't take his calls." He didn't say it for sympathy, he said it the way you set down something heavy for a second because your arms are tired. I gave him Villa 5, made him my security chief and my bodyguard and the man in charge of the houseplant harvest, and I meant every bit of it. The world had thrown away a genuine ace because he'd gotten old and quiet and kind. I picked him up off the ground. It cost me 1 fruit and a house I got for free, and it bought me the most loyal, most dangerous man in Zhangcheng. But that's not why I did it, and both of us knew it. Some debts you pay because paying them is the only way to look at yourself. I took his pathos with me to test the snowfruit theory. Then I helped the old soldier to his feet, and for the first time since I woke up on that couch, I wasn't the only person on my side of the wall I actually trusted. The empire started to look like an empire, and the money stopped making sense in a good way. Elder met the household. Wu Mei, now fully inside the operation, handed me all her money, nearly 22 million yuan, just like that, the last of the Song fortune she'd kept, and I thanked her by buying the 3 women Cartier necklaces, which cost approximately nothing against 22 million, and which Gao Ting correctly identified as a cheap, flattering bribe and kept anyway. I also learned Elder Wen, the saint doctor, had borrowed money from Wu Mei, and never once let slip where Yang lived, passed a loyalty test she didn't know she was sitting, filed that, and Han Bo moved the entire truckload for 76 million yuan, with demand still climbing, which meant the machine could now reach for level 12, 13 further. I had something like 100 million on hand and a household forming around me like a court. 2 weeks ago, I'd had a knife in my gut and 2,000 yuan on the floor. Funny how fast the world reweighs a man once he stops being soft. Then Sun Yang tried to take it all, and my ace ended him in 1 punch. It happened during a restock in the basement, and it was well built. I'll give Sun Yang that. His 4 new henchmen jumped Han Bo and Ren Dong down in the passage while Sun Yang himself held a gun on me and Grand Elder Lao up top. Revenge for the eye I'd taken, greed for the warehouse, and absurdly, a thing about Chen Yu. He wanted her still, and had somehow decided I was the obstacle, when I didn't even have it straight in my head that Chen Yu and a grain of dust were the same woman. He should have shot faster. Grand Elder Lao stepped in and put his fist through the gun, bent the barrel like a paperclip, took Sun Yang out of the world in the same motion, before the man finished his monologue. That's the thing about monologues. They're for the strong. Sun Yang wasn't. He just thought the gun made him strong, and Elder corrected the misunderstanding. I'd trusted a broken dog too far and nearly paid for it. The ace made sure I only paid in adrenaline. Lesson noted, again, even a leashed dog dreams of the throat. And down in the passage, Han Bo answered the only question that mattered about him. When the henchmen came at him and Rendong, Han Bo didn't join the coup. He could have. A strategist plays odds, and the odds in that basement, for 1 bleeding second, favored Sun Yang. Instead, Han Bo threw his own body across the passage to block it and shouted the 2 words that decided the rest of his life. Brother Shen, run, took blade after blade doing it, and kept his feet planted, buying me time I turned out not to need. Elder cleared the 4 henchmen in about the span of a breath, and Han Bo went down from blood loss, still facing the wrong way, still shielding a door for a man who was already safe. I stood over him and made a decision I'd been circling for days. This one wasn't a dog, this one was a brother. The next fruit had his name on it. And first, I had to keep him breathing, which meant I finally needed the one thing I'd sworn I didn't. A doctor. So I called the saint, and while she came, I watched the mob prove her right to have given up on it. Elder Wen would only accept payment in medicine, never money, still a saint, even now. While she made her way to us, the group chat turned on her, and it turned my stomach even though I'd have told you I had none left. A young couple whose grandfather she'd tried and failed to save started a rumor that Elder Wen was in bed with Harmony Brings Wealth, fixing drug prices, profiting off the dying. The same crowd she'd treated for free ate it up, turned on her in an afternoon, drove her out of the group heartbroken. The woman who'd asked for food in exchange for saving their lives painted as a profiteer by the people she'd saved. I ended it the way I end things. I told the whole group prices doubled tomorrow and that anyone who wanted to badmouth me was welcome to post their address so I could come discuss it in person. The chat deleted itself in about 90 seconds. Terror is faster than gratitude and lasts longer. I'm not proud of knowing that. I just know it. Elder Wen walked into my warm villa, saved my strategist's life, and then turned me down flat. She was stunned by the place. Hot water, a feast on the table, 4 beautiful women who all somehow called the same man husband. A reality so far from her cold hospital that she kept blinking at it. I bought her tools no doctor in the world had, a system-grade ultrasonic scalpel worth 2 million, miracle meds that shrank a wound to a scar in 5 minutes. She used them flawlessly. Hanbo came back from the edge like it was nothing. She was extraordinary, and she knew harmony brings wealth was me now. And I made my offer. Stay. Be this family's doctor. Warm, fed, safe, done saving strangers who spit on you for it. She said no. She wanted to keep going out there. Keep saving the ungrateful, the doomed, the ones who'd never thank her. And then she said a thing, quiet, that got under my armor, that humanity was going to go extinct like the dinosaurs did, and the only question left was how many decent moments we got on the way down. I don't know why it landed, maybe because I'd spent 2 weeks proving her point, but that night I gave an order I hadn't planned to give. Drop the prices. Noodles to 100. Sell cheap, sell wide. Keep as many of these idiots breathing as the warehouse could stretch to. Not charity. I'd still call it business if you asked. But Elder Wen walked back out into the cold to go save people who hated her, and I lowered my prices, and neither of us admitted what had just happened. I promoted Rendong in Sunyang's place, set Elder to harvesting every houseplant in the compound, and marked the next community over, Kangning, as mine to take. The saint didn't join my house. She just quietly rearranged my whole economy on her way out the door. I let her think I hadn't noticed. Then Chen Jing video called one more time, and I finally showed her the whole board. I'd been saving it. Every scheme has a moment where you stop playing and let the other side see how badly they lost, and this was mine. She called to grovel, same as always, and this time I didn't play the wavering dog. I turned the camera around, so to speak. I told her everything. I told her about the cameras, that I'd been watching Lin Shan's apartment since the first day, that I'd seen every whispered plan, every fake tear, the code word murder they'd cooked up for me. I told her Su Lei was mine now, and Su Lei leaned into frame and called me husband, sweet as sugar. Then Wu Mei leaned in on the other side and did the same. Two beautiful women, warm and fed and unmistakably home, framing the man Chen Jing had told to be a good boy and die. I watched it hit her. I watched her understand that the rainstorm, the empty apartment, the whole 2 weeks of her slow ruin, all of it had been me running her the entire time. And then because I'm thorough, I told her the last thing. Your Sun Yang's dead, by the way. The henchman she'd been sexting for supplies, gone, and she hadn't even known. Behind her, Lin Shan, who'd been listening, went digging and found the sex log on her phone, and the two of them fell on each other right there on camera, screaming, clawing, a starving man and a starving woman fighting over half a pack of noodles and the wreckage of every lie they'd told. I didn't say anything else. I just let them see me watching and turned it off. Best revenge isn't a knife. It's a mirror, held very steady, until they can't look away from what they built. Chen Jing sold Lin Shan out within the hour, and the apocalypse did the rest. First, though, I collected something. I sent Elder to fetch Lin Shan's money tree, the little potted thing on his windowsill that, in my first life, was the exact plant that grew his ice fruit. Elder traded him a single pack of noodles for it, fair and square, because we're civilized people, and there's no need to rob a man you've already ruined. So I now owned the future power of the man who froze my legs and stabbed my furnace. His ice would ripen in my house, in my hands, and he'd never even know he'd sold it for a noodle. Some poetry writes itself. Then it all came apart for him fast. Lin Shan, cornered and cruel, kicked Chen Jing out into the cold, and within the hour she was back, not alone. She'd found a 300-pound thug called Zheng Jie, Iron Fist, and 3 of his men, and she brought them to Lin Shan's door. They beat him and took his last 500,000, and Chen Jing stood behind Zheng Jie now, his woman, watching. She'd upgraded from the man who ruined her to the man who could ruin him. Broke, bruised, out of options, Lin Shan crawled off to grovel at the feet of a rich older widow called Blossoms of Fortune, the same Li Ya who'd been screaming morality at me in the group chat, who'd always wanted a pretty young man to keep and now had one at a discount. My old brother, a kept pet in a stranger's townhouse. I noted Zheng Ji's name and put it in the column of problems for later. In my first life, that man became something much worse than a thug, but that's a story for another cold night. With the betrayers sinking, I turned to logistics because an empire runs on boring things. Hanbo healed up completely on the miracle meds, good as new, better even, and I gave him Villa 6 and moved his whole 7-person family in, which bought a loyalty that no leash ever could. Then we planned the expansion. East City, where a company called Donglin Group had a boss named Wu Zhen who'd apparently built himself a literal castle, a fortified compound he called the Safe House. A future target, I noted, though I didn't yet know how much future was packed into that man. The machine hit level 13. I dumped points into my body until the pain stopped being novel. And I bought 10 tons of high-grade explosive at 8 million a ton because I'd decided the fastest way to fund the next few levels was to stop selling noodles for a while and start robbing banks. Money's worthless to everyone else, but the machine still eats it, and a vault is just a very large, very rude wallet. While I was shopping, the catalog showed me the future of my manpower problem. Down in the high-level stock past the aircraft carrier sat a T-800 DOS, a Terminator, an actual walking loyal soldier, 2 billion yuan, unlocks at level 20. Above it, a T-1000, 10 billion, level 30. I stared at those the way I'd once stared at the aircraft carrier, except this time it didn't feel like a stupid dream. I had 100 million and a plan to have a great deal more. My whole life, the thing that got me killed was not having enough hands I could trust. The machine was offering to sell me hands that could never betray me by the truckload if I just got strong enough to afford them. I intended to afford them. First, the banks. I finally gave Sule her fruit and she woke up with the best power in the whole house. I'd been holding one for her since the day she said no to the world for me, so I sat her down, told her it would hurt, and fed it to her, and she didn't awaken fire, or ice, or strength, or anything that punches. She awakened something rarer, a spiritual power, a sixth sense that unrolled the world in her mind like a live map. She could feel the space around her in 3 dimensions, walls no obstacle, and every living thing in it showed up as a point of light. Gold for the power users, green for the ordinary, a radar, a fog of war lifted. My soft, studious wife, who'd wanted to protect me with her savings, could now see an ambush before it formed. She tested it on me, giggling, narrating my own heartbeat back to me from across the room, and I realized I just handed my household the single most valuable non-combat power in the apocalypse. You can't sneak up on a woman who sees through walls. Every operation I ran from that day forward, I'd run with Sule's eyes on the whole board. She'd asked for nothing, and I'd given her a crown. Her radar came with fine print, and every line of it was good news. 10 meters of mental scan to start, walls no barrier, tagging every person as a light point and flagging which ones carried power. She could even link one other power user into the shared vision, let Elder or me see what she saw, for about half an hour before it drained her. And it scaled. Feed her more fruits down the line, and the range grew. 50 meters, 100, a whole battlefield in her head. A perfect anti-ambush tool that got better every time I could afford to upgrade her. I'd spent 2 weeks building an empire on information, cameras, eavesdropping, knowing the future, and now my wife was a living intelligence agency I could carry into a fight. And around the same time, my saint came back. Elder Wen, broken by the mob's ingratitude, worn down by the cold, and, I think, a little seduced by the simple fact of a warm room and people who wouldn't spit on her, finally agreed to be the family doctor. Wu Mei did the coaching, gentle and merciless at once. Never save a stranger without my say-so, and don't be surprised that I took all of Yang's money precisely to stop her from funding rescues into the void. Elder Wen didn't love the rules. But she'd learned what happens to a saint with no walls around her. She took the room. Then I gave Rendong a fruit, and my roster became a real army. He awakened wind, speed, the kind where a man simply isn't where he was a blink ago, crossing the room between one word and the next. So now the pieces on my board each did something no one else could. Elder was raw power, the wall puncher, the ace. Rendong was speed, the blink, the one who closes distance before you finish drawing. Sule was the eyes, the map, the ambush killer, and I was the fire and the warehouse behind it all. 4 powers, 4 roles, 1 household. Han Bo ran the money, and I finally let him sell to anyone with cash, blacklist or not. The rich who'd cursed me in the group chat could buy their lives back at full price. Face be damned. Money over pride. Always. I looked at what I'd built. An ace, a blink, a seer, a strategist, a doctor, a court of clever women, 100 million yuan, and fire in my belly. And I let myself feel it for exactly 1 breath. 2 weeks ago, I woke up on a couch with 40 minutes to live twice. Now I had a war machine. Then I put the feeling back in the drawer, because feeling good is how you stop paying attention, and the world was about to try to take it all back. On day 6, the sun came out, and the sun, it turned out, was the most dangerous thing in the sky. The snow finally broke and light came down and the whole compound cheered like children. Rescue's coming, it's over, the warmth is back. And they forgot, instantly, completely, the massacre in the plaza, and they mobbed the supply point again. 1,000 grateful, desperate people surging my truck like the last 2 weeks hadn't happened. They'd forgotten. I hadn't. And neither had Elder, who'd spent the night before burying landmines under the snow around the supply point, because my ace thinks ahead. Rendong set them off. The front rank of the surge came apart, the mob froze mid-stampede, and the 1,000 of them remembered all at once exactly what happened here to people who took instead of paid. Then, and this is the part I want you to sit with, I dropped the prices. 100 a noodle, 200. And the same crowd that had just been mine turned around and stampeded again, this time to buy, grateful, orderly, thanking me. Terror and gratitude, the 2 levers pulled in the same afternoon, and I knew the truth they were all celebrating past. The sun was the trap. When it melted the top layer, the temperature would crash again, harder, -80, and the meltwater was the same poison the snow had been. The sun wasn't rescue. The sun was the world reloading. I sold noodles to the cheering crowd and let them have their one warm afternoon because I knew how few of those were left. So I robbed a bank, and it went about as smoothly as robbing a bank in the apocalypse can go, right up until the part that changed my whole understanding of my second life. Standard Chartered Headquarters. Class A Vault. I took Elder because you bring your ace to a job like this. Getting into the building was easy. Everything's unlocked when there's no one left to lock it. But the vault itself was a different animal, a slab of engineering that laughed at master keys. That's what the 10 tons of explosive were for. There was a wrinkle. The lobby wasn't empty. 5 survivors had holed up in there, half-starved, and I did the cold math out loud, even as I hated the sound of it. I lured them close with the promise of noodles, and Elder handled them. I'll give it to you the way I give these things now. It was fast, and they didn't get up, and I'm not going to describe it because the describing is the part that rots you. They were desperate people in the wrong lobby. I needed no witnesses to a bank robbery I was going to repeat a dozen times. Both of those things are true, and neither of them makes me feel clean. What I didn't know was that there'd been a 6th. A mid-level manager named Song Fang, who'd survived precisely because she was selfish. She'd refused to share her food with her colleagues, so when the counting happened, they'd forgotten to mention she existed. She was under a lobby counter the whole time, watching everything, holding her breath. We blew the vault, and it rained money. 200 million in cash, 600 or 700 kilos of gold, and my balance rolled over past 560 million. The safe deposit boxes I opened with the master key, mostly full of property deeds now worth exactly nothing. I was a very rich man in a currency the world had stopped believing in, feeding it all to a box that still did. We caught Song Fang trying to run, and she bought her life with a secret, and the machine hit level 16 on the proceeds. She bolted for the door, and Elder, who is also faster than he has any right to be, had her before she made it. She didn't beg. She bargained, which I respected. She'd worked here. She knew there was more than what we'd blown open. Offered to show us the real vault in exchange for breathing. I filed her under useful and alive and let her live for now. The hall rocketed the machine from 13 to 16, and with level 16's money, I bought something I'd been wanting since I first counted my manpower and came up short, an intelligent construction robot. 50 million yuan. It looked, I swear, like a dwarf out of a video game, and it could build, take raw materials, and turn my scattered villas into an actual steel fortress. I bought advanced building materials by the ton to feed it, and I quietly hoarded 2 more ability fruits into the space, where time stood still, and they'd keep fresh for whoever earned them next. I was thinking further ahead now. Walls, soldiers, powers to hand out. The apocalypse was going to get worse, and I intended to be the reason, not the victim, when it did. Then I opened one particular safe deposit box, and the floor dropped out of my whole second life. The box belonged to a man named Wu Zhen, Donglin Group, the castle builder, the safe house boss, the future East City overlord I'd already marked for later. And inside his box was not gold, not cash, not deeds. It was a snake plant. An ordinary, healthy, well-watered houseplant sitting in a bank vault with a note in his hand about keeping it watered, a job he'd apparently given to Song Fang herself. I went cold in a way the apocalypse had never managed, because I knew what that plant was. A snow-free, sheltered, guaranteed to mutate plant, deposited in the most secure place in the city as a backup power source. Nobody does that. Nobody knows to do that, unless they know what's coming, unless they've seen it before. And when I made Song Fang talk, it got worse. Wu Chen had liquidated his gold weeks ago, taken out 200 million in bank loans he never intended to repay, bought out the entire flower market, stockpiled food and water on a scale that made no sense for a man who didn't know the world was ending. He knew. He'd known from the start. Wu Zhen was reborn too. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the chosen one. Somewhere across the city was a man with my exact advantage, a memory of the future, a 2-week head start, and the ruthlessness to spend it, building a castle while I built a household. And the second his fruits ripened, he'd be a power on my level with a fortress full of supplies and every reason to erase the other man who knew too much. I made the decision standing right there in the ruined vault, cold to the bone. Kill him. Early. Before his fruits ripen. Before he's strong. While I still have the jump. There's no room in one apocalypse for 2 men who've already read the ending. I also found, in another box, a mystery key labeled with a name I knew. Gao Ting. I pocketed it and said nothing. One impossible thing at a time. Song Fang's real vault turned my fortune absurd, and the fruits it bought turned my fire into something with a star in it. She led us to a hidden switch, row 5, box 6, and behind it was the true headquarters vault, the one the public numbers never touched. Mountains of gold, boxes of foreign cash, dollars and pounds and euros and yen and won, stacked like firewood. platinum group medals in sealed cases. My balance didn't tick up, it detonated, past 2 billion yuan. The machine surged to level 18 on the strength of it, and with that, I finally stopped hoarding and ate my saved fruits. One took my fire to level 3, Samadhi True Fire, a flame with a temper, the kind that burns things that aren't supposed to burn. The next took it to level 4, and the machine gave it a name that made the back of my neck prickle. Ziwei Heavenly Fire, Starborn Fire, fire that answered to the night sky. My body, already upgraded past a normal man's twice over, climbed again until it outstripped even elders, and elder punches through walls. A level 4 power user in a city where the strongest thing walking was maybe level 2. Nobody in Zhangcheng could touch me now. Except maybe a man who'd had the same 2 weeks I had and had spent them building a fortress instead of a family. I looked at my 2 billion yuan and my starfire and my unmatched body, and I did not feel safe. I felt like I was in a race I'd only just learned I was running. Wu Zhen was out there, and now I had the strength to go take him. If I could get through the walls of a castle built by a man who saw me coming. To kill a man who saw me coming, I needed a key to his castle, and the key turned out to be the woman we'd caught under the counter. Because Song Fang wasn't just a bank manager, she was the wife of Zhou Hao, and Zhou Hao was Wu Zhen's most loyal core manager, the man who in my first life literally took blows meant for his boss and died doing it. The most trusted man in Wu Zhen's fortress was married to the woman shivering in front of me. You don't get openings like that, you make them, or the universe hands them to you as an apology for the knife. So I went to work on her, and I did it with warmth instead of threats, because warmth holds longer. I set up a hot pot in the ruined bank, steam and good food in a building full of the cold, and I gave her a Patek Philippe off the top of the hall, and I laid out the offer plainly. Help me, live well, live warm, on the winning side. I even ran her through a lie detector I'd bought from the machine because I don't trust a turned heart I can't verify. She checked out, and then she did the part I couldn't. She went home and strong-armed her own reluctant husband into it, the two of them working through it with the private shorthand of a long marriage. She even used their little countdown, 521, I love you, to close him. Zhou Hao, loyal to a fault, agreed to betray the man he'd have died for because his wife asked and because the alternative was watching her freeze. I learned from them that Wu Zhen's safe house had a ring of bunkers around it and that Liu lived in the nearest one. A door. I had a door. By the way, I'd been using a fake name in public this whole stretch. Lin Shan. I'd taken my dead brother's name to wear on jobs like this, so that anything terrible done by the man robbing the city got done under his name and not mine. Petty. Deeply satisfying. Lin Shan was going to have quite a reputation by the time I was done, and he'd never know why people flinched. Then I made sure my 2 new inside people couldn't change their minds, and I'm not going to pretend it was gentle. I planted implants in them. Polonium bugs, the machine called them. 30 million yuan each, sitting in their stomachs. Cooperate within 5 days, and I'd remove them clean once Wu Zhen was handled. Fail me, run, warn him, and they'd stop being a problem in a way that couldn't be undone. I told them exactly what they were carrying, because a leash only works if the dog knows it's there. Then I sent them home with a cover story and a countdown. It's an ugly thing to do to 2 people whose only crime was surviving. I know, but I was walking into a fortress built by the one man in the city who might be my equal, and I'd already died once trusting that people would do the right thing without a reason to. This time, everyone in my operation had a reason. Some of them called it loyalty, some of them called it a hot pot and a watch, and 2 of them called it a thing in their stomach with a 5-day fuse. I'd make it right if they earned it. I usually meant to. I hit another bank on the way, and this one taught me exactly how much I trusted my ace because it cost him a test. Wanda Bank. I brought the upgraded kit, a smarter snow robot I'd nicknamed Little Stinky, a life detector dog, a metal detector cat, the machine's whole menagerie of nonsense that happened to work. There was a group of bank staff trapped inside, and among them a loud, arrogant rich kid named Xia Guang, the son of a deputy general manager. Elder handled the room. I'll hold to my rule and give you the result and not the process. It was over quickly, and it was not clean, and I keep the camera off the worst of it on purpose, for my sake as much as yours. One of the staff, dying, managed to photograph Elder and send it to Xia Guang's father before the end. A loose thread. I noted it. The balance climbed toward 1.5 billion. Then Elder spared one hostage to please me, and she made the mistake of trying to turn me against him, and I made an example of loyalty. Her name doesn't matter. Rose, she called herself, the prettiest of the group, and Elder, thinking of his boss, left her breathing as a sort of gift. Bad instinct. Good heart. Because the second she thought she'd read the room, she leaned close to me and whispered that I should get rid of that old bastard, that Elder was dangerous, that she'd be so much more useful and grateful and loyal than some aging thug. She'd misjudged the one thing in my life that isn't for sale. I burned her. On the spot, one clean burst of Samadhi fire, and she was gone. An image, a heat, a reaction, and then nothing where she'd stood. I didn't enjoy it and I didn't hesitate. Grand Elder Lao had dug me a future out of the snow with his bare hands and asked for nothing. A stranger does not get to whisper him into a grave to save her own skin. Loyalty over beauty, every time. Elder looked at me after, this hard old soldier, and his eyes did something they hadn't done for his own tragedies. Brothers move mountains, I told him. He'd moved one for me the day he stepped in front of Sun Yang's gun. I was just returning the favor. Meanwhile, across the city, Xiaoguang's father, Fan Cheng, reached the ruined Wand vault, found his son among the dead and his fortune gone, and swore a careful, patient revenge. His bodyguards studied the wounds and guessed wrong about who did it. Good. Let him hunt the wrong ghost for a while. I cleared out the rest of the city's gold, learned where they'd hidden the future, and pulled a movie star out of a kidnapper's hands on the way home. I hit Jiangtai, the small banks, a gold shop called Jinkson, heavy with 600 kilos of bullion, balance past 4 billion, machine to level 19. I visited Ma Lin, gifted my brother a pistol, and he paid me another 80 million, and better, a secret, the shelter. He knew where it was now, under Bama Mountain in the western suburbs, 8 peaks over it, room for 200,000 souls, sorted into 4 castes, leaders, scientists, guards, and at the bottom the laborers, who doubled, he said quietly, as test subjects. He'd be evacuated inside a week, and he swore, drunk, sincere, my brother, that he'd bring me with him. I filed every word. A caste system carved into a mountain with a bottom tier used as material. That was the future the officials had chosen to save. I intended to see it with my own eyes eventually, on my own terms. On the way back, I ran into a gang, square-faced thugs raiding for a boss who'd made 2 mistakes. They'd attacked Ma Lin's villa and they'd kidnapped He Hua, my gentleman play actress, the spicy chicken girl, the one I'd sold supplies to through a cracked window and left wondering what I looked like. I went through the gang like the fire I now was, faster than Elder, faster than Rendong, a burst of samadhi flame clearing a whole room, and I reached He Hua, held at knife point by the last of them. I didn't even slow down. And when the mask came off and she saw the face behind Harmony Brings Wealth, the man who'd been polite to her through a window while a city died, she recognized her handsome stranger, and I watched her decide, at knife point, that she was going home with me. He Hua came home ready to fight for me, and found there was nothing to fight. She'd built herself up the whole ride, this bold actress, rehearsing her declaration. She was going to march in and announce she'd battle my girlfriend for me if that's what it took. She marched in. She announced it. And Sule and Wu Mei looked up from whatever domestic empire running they were doing, both called me husband in the same breath, and cheerfully welcomed her as the third mistress before she'd finished her speech. The wind went right out of her. There was no rival to fight. There was a household and it had a vacancy, and it had already filed her paperwork. I've watched a lot of harem dramas curdle into jealousy in my old line of work as a novelist. This wasn't that. Sule ran the house like a benevolent HR department, and the women she brought in stopped being competitors the moment they walked through the door. Elder Wen treated the knife mark on He Hua's neck with a system spray that left no scar, and by dinner the actress was arguing with Gao Ting about seating like she'd lived there a month. I didn't fully understand what I'd built. I just knew it held, and that in a world designed to make people turn on each other, a house that didn't was worth more than the 2 billion in the box. Then I recruited the girl who used to rob me, because her power was the key that opened Wu Zhen's front door. Jiang Yu. Young Lady Jiang. In my first life, she walked through my walls and robbed me blind 3 separate times, this small, pure-faced thief with the one perfect power. So I found her. She was besieged, as it happened, by a rich idler named Ding Rui, who'd already assaulted a neighbor of hers and had her next on his list, and I sent her photos. My 25-degree living room, a running shower, hot food, to a woman freezing in the dark with a predator at the door. That's not a temptation, it's a rescue. She agreed. Rendong blinked over and handled Ding Rui at her doorstep and brought her home. The karma of it wasn't lost on me. Last time she robbed me 3 times. This time she walked in the front door as mine, and her wall-walking power, the thing she'd used to steal from me, was going to be the thing that got me into the one fortress in the city I couldn't punch through. The universe had said, "Lol, no second chances, buddy," when it stabbed me. I was starting to think it hadn't read its own fine print. I gave her the fruit, confirmed her the honest way, and watched her walk through a wall. 6 women in the house now, more or less, Sule first among them, then Wu Mei, He Hua, Jiang Yu, with Elder Wen the doctor still keeping 1 foot out the door, and little Gao Ting orbiting the whole thing taking notes. Sule ruled it all, coaching each new arrival on where the loyalty lines were drawn. I showed Jiang Yu the vending machine, my actual secret, the thing under everything, and ran her on the lie detector first, because I show that card to no one I haven't verified. She was true, so I fed her a fruit, and she awakened exactly what I needed. wall walking. She could phase through solid stone, through floors, through a fortress door, so long as she held her breath while she did it. There it was. The plan for Wu Zhen had a ghost in it now. I took her out for live fire training, and I made her cross a line because a soft trigger finger gets everyone killed. She could shoot a paper target at 10 meters after an afternoon. Quick study, my little thief, and I fitted her with a bulletproof suit for the night's work. On the way, a looter gang was tearing apart a supermarket, and I made her use them. Real targets. I made her blood herself, put rounds into men who were trying to put rounds into us, because the first time you hesitate can't be the night everything's on the line. She did it. She wasn't happy. Good. I don't want happy, I want able. And in the middle of the raid, I picked up a name that mattered. Boss Chen. A warlord already dug into the nearby Cloud Serene residence. A man who'd bought supplies on day one and bribed himself a private army before anyone else even understood the world had ended. Another prepared mind. Another rival to slot onto a board that was getting crowded. Liu Kai, Wu Zhen, Fan Cheng, Zheng Ji, and now Boss Chen. Boss Chen turned out to be a ghost from my own robberies, and I turned two enemies against each other before either knew I was there. Boss Chen was Fan Cheng, the vengeful deputy general manager whose son Elder had killed at Wand, warlording Cloud Serene now, hunting the wrong ghost for his revenge. And he had a rival next door, He Chun, an ex-food delivery rider who, in my first life, awakened one of the rarest powers going, lightning. A walking Thor, neutral for now, a buffer between the bigger families. Two future powers, side by side, one grieving and armed, one valuable and unrecruited. So I did the efficient thing. I told Fan Cheng's people, through a thug in passing, that He Chun was the man who'd killed Xia Guang and taken Rose, a lie with no fingerprints, and I dropped a note where He Chun would find it. When Fan Cheng comes for you, call me, and I'll save your brothers. One sentence lit a war between two men who'd never wronged each other, and positioned me as the savior at the end of it. I didn't have to fight either of them. I just had to introduce them. The strategist Han Bo would have been proud. Honestly, I think I was starting to think like the men I kept recruiting. The war I'd seeded caught fire that night, and I spent the evening before my biggest job the only sane way, with my ridiculous family. Fan Cheng, certain now that He Chun had killed his son and stolen his hostage, mustered his whole army to attack Cloud Serene by dark. Perfect. Let them bleed each other. I'd collect the survivor. And at home, the night before I went to kill the one man who could match me, the villa was a circus. He Hua sulked with theatrical green tea jealousy over some imagined slight. Gao Ting cheated at mahjong and blamed the tiles. Sule ran the table like a casino boss, and I sat in the middle of it and told them plainly what tonight was, that I was going to hit Wu Zhen's fortress, that the man was reborn like me, that this was the most dangerous thing I'd done in either life. I even let the rest of them in on the ability fruit secret at last, and promised each of them a power in time. They took the news the way that house took everything, with noise and worry, and someone immediately asking what power they got to pick. I looked around the table at the life I'd built out of a knife wound and 40 spare minutes, and I decided I wasn't going to lose it to a man in a castle. Then I went to load the trucks. We rolled on Wu Zhen's castle at night, and I brought everything. Han Bo had 120 vetted men, armed with machine guns and landmines, dug in around a forward position in case the whole thing went bad. My strike team was small and surgical. Me for the fire, Elder for the fist, Zhang Yu for the walls, and Sule for the eyes, riding along with her radar lit, painting the fortress for me in gold and green points before we ever got close. Rendong stayed home to guard the family, because you never leave the house empty on the night you go hunting a king. The safe house earned its reputation. 12 meters of fortified wall above ground, 14 below, a ring of 15 bunkers around it like teeth. A castle built by a man who'd known for 2 weeks exactly what was coming and spent a fortune making sure it couldn't reach him. Sule's map showed me the shape of it, the guards, the layers, and it showed me our inside man, Zhou Hao, moving to the main door to open it for us, right on schedule, his wife's life and his own riding on the next 30 seconds. Then the plan died. Wu Zhen already suspected his most loyal man, and he did 2 impossible things in a row. The door didn't open. On Sule's map, I watched Zhou Hao's gold point stop at the entrance, hesitate, and then a second point closed on him, and his light went out. Wu Zhen had seen it coming, locked the door, and shot his own most loyal manager dead on the threshold for the crime of maybe betraying him. Cold. Efficient. The move of a man who'd learned, in some other life, that loyalty is the thing that kills you. And then he did the thing that turned my stomach to ice. The polonium bug, my leash, the thing in Zhou Hao's stomach that should have been my insurance. Wu Zhen dealt with it, and it did nothing, because Wu Zhen's power wasn't fire, or strength, or anything that fights. It was space. A pocket dimension he carried inside himself, where he stored his supplies, his weapons, his whole hoarded fortune. Time supreme, space supreme, the kind of power that swallows problems whole. My polonium threat, my whole clever leash, meant nothing to a man who could file a poison away in a fold of reality. I'd walked my team up to the door of the one power in the city that could no-sell my entire approach, but he'd killed my inside man, and I don't take that quietly. Zhang Yu held her breath and phased through 14 meters of fortress wall like it was fog, found the surveillance and the switch, and killed them from the inside. And with the door's controls dead, my master key finally bit. The safe house opened, and I walked into a stalemate with a god. Fire met space in that castle, and for a long bad minute space was winning. Wu Jun tried to turn my own team against me first, dangled something at Zhang Yu, some offer, playing for the wall walker the way I'd have played for her. She didn't take it. Then we stormed him, and I learned what Space Supreme actually meant in a fight. Bullets. He opened a tear in the air and they went into it and vanished. Grenades. Swallowed. I had Elder's Man open up with a Gatling, a solid stream of rounds, and he stood in it and absorbed the whole thing into his pocket dimension. And then, this was the ugly part, he reflected it back, flung our own firepower out of the tear at us, and we scattered for cover. You cannot shoot a man who eats bullets. You cannot blow up a man who pockets the blast. Elder's fist was faster than his eye, but the space kept folding the distance away. We were losing. I could feel it. For the first time in this second life, I'd walked into something my cheats couldn't simply overpower. Then I remembered what I was holding, and I remembered the one thing space couldn't do. Here's the flaw in a man who hoards the world inside himself. Everything he owns is in one place, and fire doesn't care where you hide it. I stopped trying to hit him, and I threw fire instead. Samadhi True Fire, Ziwei Heavenly Fire, the starborn flame the machine had named. And Wu Zhen did the instinctive thing, the thing that had saved him all fight. He opened his space and stored the flames away, filed my fire into his pocket dimension like he'd filed everything else. That was the mistake. That was the whole ball game. Because my fire doesn't go out when you close a lid on it. It burned inside his space. It caught his hoard, the stockpiled food, the water, the fortune, and, critically, all the green plants he'd bought out the entire flower market to grow his backup powers, and it lit the inside of his own dimension like a furnace. He coughed, and there was blood in it, and the tear in the air around him started to flicker wrong, started to rupture. A man who keeps his whole world in one pocket has one pocket to lose, and I just set it on fire from the inside. Sulei's mental wave hit him at the same moment, a spike of pure spiritual force that staggered him mid-panic, and Wu Zhen, for the first time, ran. He ran outside, under the open night sky, which was the last mistake he got to make, because Ziwei Heavenly Fire is starborn. It answers to the night. And when Wu Zhen broke out into the open under the Big Dipper with his space already burning and rupturing inside him, my fire didn't shrink in the cold. It grew, drawing on the stars overhead, roaring up hotter than it had ever burned indoors. Elder's fist closed off one escape. Zhang Yu's rounds closed off another. Sulei's mind pinned him in place. And my fire, fed by the whole night sky, poured into the failing seams of his pocket dimension until there was more fire inside him than space left to hold it. His dimension overloaded, and a man who kept everything, kept nothing. When the space collapsed, it took him with it, and it left no body, no hoard, no loot, nothing at all. That's the cruel joke of a space power. Everything he'd spent 2 weeks and 200 million yuan hoarding just stopped existing, all at once, along with him. The other reborn man, the only person in the city who'd read the same ending I had, was gone, and he didn't even leave a coin behind. I stood there breathing hard, starfire guttering off my skin, and for 1 second I let myself feel it. I'd won. The race I'd only just learned I was running, and I'd won it, and there was no one left in Jiangcheng who could. And that's when the thing in the fire looked at me. Something enormous was watching from inside the collapse, and it decided I should die. As Wu Zhen's space folded in on itself, for half a heartbeat it tore open onto somewhere else, somewhere vast and cold and old. And in the fire and the rupture I saw a head. Just a head, and an eye, colossal, ancient, the head of some beast so far beyond me that my mind refused to give it a scale. It looked at me, a small man standing in the ashes of a fortune, thinking he'd reached the top of the world, and it thought a single thing at me, one word, pressed straight into the meat of my brain with a weight that buckled my knees and stopped my heart mid-beat. Die, and I started to. I felt my heart simply give up under the pressure of that word, felt the starfire go cold, felt myself folding toward the ground with my whole body shutting down the way it had once shut down around a knife. One thought from that thing, and I was dying again, just like that. All my powers and my billions and my clever plans worth exactly nothing against a glance from something that lived on the other side of a dead man's pocket. Then the vending machine flared. Behind my eyes, in the warehouse it had become, my stupid, glorious magic box lit up gold, poured light out through me, wrapped around the failing furnace in my gut, and shoved that killing word back out of my body. My heart caught, my knees held, and the rupture sealed, and the beast's eye was gone, and I was standing alone in the snow outside a castle that no longer had an owner, alive by the grace of a thing that got stronger every time I went broke. I killed a god-tier man tonight, and in the 2 seconds it took me to feel proud of it, something far worse looked up from beyond the edge of the world, learned my face, and told me to die, and only a vending machine stood between me and doing it. I should have gone home and thought hard about that eye, about what it meant that the snow and the shelter and the cast carved into the mountain and the news they kept deleting about the coast were maybe all just the sound of that thing clearing its throat, about the fact that for the first time in 2 lifetimes something had noticed me, and it lived on the far side of the world. But here's the thing about being told to die by a god. It doesn't erase your to-do list, because I wasn't finished. There was still a whole city that hadn't figured out it was mine. There was a widow in my house whose husband was murdered by a man still breathing, and there were 2 people out there, the 2 people this entire second life started with, whom I had very deliberately not touched, not out of mercy, out of patience. I'd wanted them to sink all the way to the bottom on their own before the bottom fell out. The monster could get in line. I had a family to avenge and a couple to bury first. Ask me if it was worth it. Go ahead. Ask me again when I find out what wants me dead. First I took Wu Jun's castle, because a dead king's fortress shouldn't go to waste. The safe house was better than I'd even hoped, 6,000 square meters of it, an indoor vegetable garden, a pool, a gym, the whole insane vanity project of a man who'd known the world was ending and decided to end it in comfort. I made it my new East City headquarters and moved the operations center of gravity across the city. His 2 kept actresses, Nana and Yaya, I handed off to Grand Elder Lao, mostly to watch him sputter about it, and I sat in Wu Zhen's own war room and drew the next lines on the map. The plan was simple, and it was greedy. Han Bo would take the surrounding districts, Sunshine City, Shanshui Wenyuan, the lot, by force where he had to, but keeping the residents alive, because a live resident is a paying customer, and a dead one is just a corpse that doesn't buy noodles. Harvest their cash, their gold, their metals, their houseplants. Prices back down to 100 a noodle for volume. I wasn't gouging anymore, I was farming. And the next big target, the one that mattered, the Zhongcheng Granary. 10,000 tons of grain, currently being claimed by the one family in this city I owed a personal debt, the Song family, Liu Kai. The man who murdered Wu Mei's husband to steal a fortune and who I'd promised over a dinner table would answer for it. It was time to go collect. While I planned a war, my old life kept rotting in the background, and it was the funniest show in the apocalypse. Lin Shan, my brother, my murderer, the man who froze my legs, was now a kept pet. He'd fled broke to the rich widow Li Ya, Blossoms of Fortune, who'd always wanted a pretty young man and now owned one at a discount, and she was working him like a rented mule. And in a burst of pure spite, he posted his old sex tape with Chen Jing to the owner's group chat, torching both their names in front of the whole community at once. Mass mockery. The couple who'd murdered me for a warm apartment, now the compound's favorite punchline. Chen Jing, meanwhile, had attached herself to the thug Zheng Ji, Iron Fist, and was already cheating on him too, with one of his own henchmen, a man called Liu Jinyang, because Chen Jing could not stop being Chen Jing even at the end of the world. And Zheng Ji's gang and Lin Shan's new widow were feuding, which is where my strategist earned his keep in the most beautiful way. Han Bo invented a protection racket on the spot, extorted 1.2 million out of Li Ya to make Zheng Ji leave her alone, and then quietly planted the seed to extort her again next week for the same service. We weren't just draining the rich, we were charging the wreckage of my old life a subscription fee to keep suffering. I didn't lift a finger, I just watched the people who'd killed me pay my people to torment each other, and I ate very well. Then the Lightning Man called, right on the schedule I'd written for him. My little frame-up had gone off perfectly. I'd told Fan Cheng that He Chun killed his son, and Fan Cheng had mustered his whole army and marched on Cloud Serene to get his revenge on a man who'd done nothing. And He Chun, the ex-delivery rider who, in my first life, awakened into a walking thunderstorm, was suddenly besieged by an army he couldn't beat, remembering the note some stranger had left him. When Fan Cheng comes for you, call me, he called. He'd save his brothers, he said, and submit if I came, which was exactly the deal I'd engineered from 3 moves back. I told him to hold on, and I headed for Cloud Serene to go collect my Thunder God from the war I'd started for him. Taking Cloud Serene took about 4 minutes and 1 balcony. He Chun's men, to their credit, almost blew it out of loyalty. They'd gotten it into their heads that I'd offered up my own women to Fan Cheng to buy peace, and they refused the deal on principle, wouldn't trade their boss's honor for it, which told me everything good I needed to know about the people He Chun kept around him, I sorted the misunderstanding by slapping a mouthy henchman across the room to establish who was actually running this conversation, and then I went up to a balcony and went to work. Sulei's radar was in my head the whole time, painting Fan Cheng's 7 bodyguards as gold points in the dark before they knew they were targets. I dropped all 7 from the balcony, clean, one after another, and then I opened up on the 100-man army below with a submachine gun until the ones who could run, ran. It wasn't a battle, it was a correction. He Chun watched a stranger dismantle the force that had him cornered in the time it takes to smoke a cigarette, and he came over to my side the way sensible people do when the alternative is on fire. New general acquired, lightning, the rarest card on the board, and down in the wreckage, a dying man was about to hand me the biggest secret in the city. Fan Cheng died telling me the secret that explained the whole back half of the apocalypse, and I almost wished he hadn't. He was finished, I'd seen to that, but he had breath enough to gloat. The way beaten men do when they think a piece of knowledge makes them matter. And what he told me turned my stomach in a way even the bank lobbies hadn't. His son, Xia Guang, the arrogant kid Elder had put down at Wanda, he wasn't just dead, he was walking. Because there was a thing in this city called the Heaven and Earth Society, and it wasn't a gang, it was scientists. A cabal out of some research institute running a program with a beautiful name, Phoenix Nirvana, where they put AI chips into fresh corpses and switch them back on. It half worked, which is the worst way for a thing like that to work. The bodies got up. But the AI came up wrong, corrupted, hungry, and what stood back up wasn't a person or even really a machine. It was a thing that ate memory, ate people, to get at whatever it is that makes them people. Xiaoguang was one of them now, shambling around south of the city in a dead zone that was about to become a great deal more than a dead zone. That was the future I hadn't seen the first time, because the first time I'd frozen to death before it fully arrived. Snow was the opening act, the coast was the headliner. And this, reanimated corpses with broken machines for souls, was the thing crawling up from underneath while everyone looked at the sky. There was a grace note too. One of Fan Cheng's own sub-thugs, a man named Zhang Lei, chose that exact moment to defect. Fan Cheng had forced a woman Zhang Lei loved into ruin and gotten her killed, and Zhang Lei had been waiting a long time to settle it. He did the settling himself, and then he asked to work for me. I took him. A man with a real grievance against the people I'm fighting is the most reliable employee there is. I'd built half my household on that principle, starting with my own reflection. I marked Zhang Lei for the south. Someone was going to have to keep an eye on the memory eaters, and it might as well be a man with nothing left to lose down there. Then I turned north and went to take the granary out from under the Song family, and I did it without them ever seeing my face. The Jiangcheng Granary, 10,000 tons of grain, the single most valuable pile of anything left in the city, and the Song family had only just moved in to claim it, exactly the way Wang Peng's deathbed tip had promised them. 40 men, guns from Wang Peng's army, 3 snowmobiles at the gate, a serious garrison, and completely blind to the man walking through their blind spots because I'd brought the 2 things that make walls meaningless. Sule rode along with her radar lit, and the whole garrison unrolled in my head like a map with the fog peeled off. Every guard a gold point, every empty corridor a safe path, every patrol timed before it happened. And I'd bought a little system trick, a bug the catalog cheerfully called Walls Have Ears, that let me stand in an empty room and listen to conversations 3 rooms over, so I didn't storm the granary. I toured it, invisible, listening, until I found the man I wanted, Wang Hong, Liu Kai's 3rd uncle, running the place, and took him quietly and put a polonium bug in his belly so he'd stay helpful. And in the listening, the Song family's whole hand fell open. Liu Kai had murdered the head of the Lin family to steal their snowmobiles and taken the Lin daughter, a girl named An Yue, as a prize. The whole family was mid-relocation, strung out and vulnerable. The shelter had sent 3 men sniffing around the granary and lost them and meant to send more. The snake was overextended, distracted, and completely unaware that a ghost had just walked into its new nest and learned everything. I emptied the granary into thin air, and then I made Wang Hong phone his nephew and cry wolf. Wang Hong tried to shoot me first, once he understood what was happening, reached for the gun on his hip and pulled the trigger on an empty chamber because I'd swapped his rounds out the moment I took him, and I made him understand the lesson by digging the 1 bullet I'd left him out of his own wrist, slowly, so it would stick. After that, he was very cooperative. I used the polonium leash to walk him around gathering his own men into one place, and then I dealt with the 40-man Song garrison the way you deal with 40 armed men when you have a submachine gun and the element of total surprise. I'll give you the result and spare you the rest. It was fast, and when it was done, the granary belonged to no one but me. Then came the part I'd built the whole thing around. I had the vending machine vacuum the entire granary into my space, all 10,000 tons of grain, the cotton, the processing machines, the works, gone in minutes into the warehouse behind my eyes, leaving nothing but a swept concrete floor where a family's whole future had been sitting an hour before. And I put a phone in Wang Hong's shaking hand and had him call Liu Kai with exactly the wrong story. The shelter attacked us. Heavy losses. Come quick. Come now. Sending the snake sprinting toward an empty building while I took a hostage, his third young master, Shulong, and walked out the back toward the Song family's undefended home. The Song family was about to have the single worst night of an already terrible apocalypse, and they were going to spend the whole of it chasing a ghost around an empty granary while I robbed them blind. I'd promised Wu Mei they'd answer, I just hadn't told her how much I was going to enjoy collecting. While Liu Kai raced toward an empty granary, I let myself into his empty house and met the girl who was already there to kill everyone in it. The Song mansion was stripped of its fighters. They'd all rushed to the granary, leaving the women, the elders, the children, and a fortune. I came in quiet, with a system trick I'd been saving, an incense the catalog called agarwood, a puff of which put a person to sleep in about 3 seconds. So the household went down soft and unharmed, room by room, and I went looking for the secret room every rich paranoid man has, and I found it, and I emptied it. Something like 700 million in cash and gold and jewelry, the concentrated blood money of a family built on a murdered brother, poured into my space. And in the middle of the sacking, I found I wasn't the only intruder. Her name was An Yue, the Lin family daughter, the one Liu Kai had made an orphan and a prize, killing her father for his snowmobiles and marking her for his own bed. She'd crept into the mansion that night with a knife and a plan to murder the entire Song family and then herself, and she'd already started. The third young master, Xu Long, was hers before I ever got to him. I found her with the knife still in her hand and the exit strategy of a person who didn't intend to use the exit. I stopped her. Not the killing. The Song family had that coming, and then some. The last part. The part where she followed them down. I told her plainly that I was no friend of the Song, that I'd come to do to them exactly what she'd come to do, only bigger, that her father would be avenged tonight whether she was alive to see it or not, and that seeing it was the better option. She was sharp enough, even at the bottom of her grief, to hear the truth in it. She lowered the knife. She joined us. And Sule, back home, when the reports came in, silently added a name to a list only she was keeping, because my head wife had opinions about who the household could use, and a grieving Lin family heiress with nothing left to lose and everything to prove was exactly her kind of recruit. Then Liu Kai got home, and I watched a warlord lose his mind in real time, and I didn't have to touch him once. Picture his night. He'd sprinted to the granary on his uncle's panicked call to find it empty. Swept clean, 10,000 tons simply gone, 40 of his men dead on the floor, and no army, no attacker, no explanation, no tracks in the snow, no enemy, just absence, total and impossible. Then he raced home to regroup and found that too gutted, the secret room bare, the fortune vanished, his family sleeping where they'd dropped, and his son, the son he'd left alive at the granary, somehow dead in the mansion miles away, every snowmobile gone, the house stripped to the studs, his people freezing in their underclothes because I'd even taken the coats. None of it was possible. That was the point. I hadn't just robbed Liu Kai, I'd robbed the world of its rules right in front of him and left him standing in the wreckage with no enemy to fight, because you can't raise an army against a thing that leaves no trace. He started to come apart. You could see it setting in, the specific rot of a rational man forced to consider that maybe it wasn't a man at all, maybe it was a ghost, maybe the brother he'd had murdered had finally come to collect. I'd never said a word to him. I'd just made his reality stop making sense, which is a crueler thing to do to a proud man than any wound. The knife I'd wanted for Liu Kai was never going to be steel. It was going to be his own mind, and it was already doing the work for me. And then, because I am thorough, I made him kill the last person who could tell him it was all just a man. Wang Hong, the uncle, my hostage, the one man alive who'd seen my face and knew there was a human behind the ghost story. I let him go. Removed him from the granary, kept the polonium bug ticking in his belly as insurance, and turned him loose to chase after Liu Kai's convoy on foot through the dark and the wind, shouting to be let back in, shouting that he could explain everything. But it was night, and the wind was screaming, and Liu Kai's men were already half mad with ghost stories, walking backward with their guns up because they'd convinced themselves something was following them. And out of that howling dark came a lone dark figure, staggering, calling out in a voice the wind tore to shreds until it didn't sound like a man at all. It sounded like the thing they were all terrified of. So they did what terrified men with guns do. They shot the figure in the dark. And when they went to check the body, Liu Kai found his own uncle, the last witness. The one thread back to sanity, cut by his own men's hands because I'd pointed him into the dark at exactly the right moment. Liu Kai dropped to his knees in the snow beside a man he just had killed, and something in him that had been bending finally broke clean through. I still hadn't laid a hand on him. I just kept him alive and kept feeding him a horror story until he did the murdering himself. Wu Mei wanted her husband avenged. I was taking my time, because some debts you don't pay in a single night. You pay them slowly, in pieces, until the man owes so much of his own mind that there's barely anything left to finish. Barely, not nothing. The finishing would come. But not tonight. And Yue came home and Sule slotted her into the household like she'd been holding the spot. My headwife had a read on people that would have made her rich in the old world. She took one look at An Yue, the manners, the ruined dignity, the family status still clinging to her like perfume, and folded her in as the fifth of the household, with one condition An Yue asked for herself and I respected, that she'd keep to herself until the Song family was finished, all of it, root and branch. She wasn't ready to be anyone's anything while her father's killer still breathed. Fair. I put her in the when the job's done column and meant it. Out in the city, the betrayer circus kept turning. Zheng Jai and his henchmen had refined their protection racket into something almost impressive in its ugliness, squeezing the ones who couldn't fight back, taking money from the rich, taking worse from the ones with nothing to give. It was the kind of thing that, in the old life, I'd have been too soft and too weak to stop. In this one, I filed it because Zheng Jie's whole operation was standing on a fault line, and I already knew where the crack was. Chen Jing. She was still cheating on him, still Chen Jing all the way down, and a man who builds his little kingdom on a woman like that is building it on ice in an ice age. Grand Elder Lao found something warm in all this cold, and I'd have burned the city down before I took it from him. It started with a rescue. Elder pulled Chen Yu, my internet celebrity customer, a grain of dust, out of Zhengji's hands, and she came to the villa and joined the household. One more woman who'd rather be safe here than free out there. But the real thing happened on the next rescue. Elder saved a college girl from Zhengji's racket, and it was Li Qian, the young nurse from the plaza, the one I'd spared a search and handed food to weeks ago without knowing why. Elder looked at her and something in the old soldier, the one who'd buried a wife and lost a daughter and gone quiet in a gatehouse to survive it, woke up. He asked me, awkward as a teenager, if he could keep her. Offered to give back Nana and Yaya to make it even, like love was a transaction he owed me for. The two actresses, for their part, made the mistake of their short lives, tried to whisper Elder into turning on me, tried to set Li Qian up to seduce Rendong and fracture the whole house. Elder heard it, and the man who moves mountains for me made very sure they'd never whisper poison into a household again. It was cold, and it was final, and I won't dress it up. But Li Qian had overheard the whole thing, heard exactly how deep Elder's loyalty ran, heard him refuse to be turned at any price, and she chose him for it. A real thing, mutual, the older man and the younger woman both a little astonished to be feeling it at the end of the world. Of everything I built in that second life, Elder's quiet happiness is the one I'm proudest of, and I didn't even do anything but stay out of its way. By now the house held 8, and the map held most of the city, and I finally had generals worth the name. The villa had become a court. Sule first, then Wu Mei, He Hua, Zhang Yu, Chen Yu, An Yue, with Elder Wen and little Gao Ting orbiting closer every day, and it ran, against every law of harem drama, without a single knife in the dark, because Sule ran it, and Sule did not permit nonsense. At the War Council, my women had opinions, and the sharpest was Wu Mei's. Wiped the Song family out entirely. All of it. No mercy, no half measures. Loyalty and grief had burned the softness clean out of her. Elder Wen flinched at it. Wu Mei didn't blink. I noted the difference and loved them both for being exactly what they were. Han Bo, meanwhile, was conquering districts like a man doing paperwork, 3 more taken, 800 fresh recruits, 200 million banked, houseplants harvested by the truckload against the day the fruits ripened. And 2 new faces earned their place. A former teacher named Xu Yun, who could count a battlefield the way Han Bo counted a warehouse, promoted to keep the books, and an ex-soldier called Da Bin, steady under fire, handed to Ren Dong as a fighter. The plan was greedy and clear. Take all of North City in 3 days, then east, and then eventually go south and deal with the memory eaters. An empire with a to-do list. But first, I had a warning to give and a loose end to finally tie off. The oldest one. The one this whole life started with. I told Elder to keep his eyes open that night, because the reanimated thing that used to be Xiaoguang might follow his own father's blood trail back toward us, and I wanted the ace awake if a memory eater came knocking. That was the future edging in. Then I turned to the past, which was busy collapsing on its own, because Zhengji's little kingdom finally hit the fault line I'd been watching. Chen Jing had pushed her luck one too many times with his henchmen, and Lin Shan worked half to death as a rich widow's kept pet, cornered, humiliated, out of every option a person has, finally snapped. He did something violent enough that he had to run, and in a city I owned, there was really only one direction a running man could run, straight toward me. The 2 people who'd told me to be a good boy and die were about to arrive at my door at last, hauled in from opposite ends of their own ruin, right on the schedule I'd been quietly keeping since the day I woke up on that couch. I'd waited a long time for this. I could afford to make it worth the wait. They came to me from opposite ends of the same ruin, and I'd built the whole city into a funnel that pointed at my door. Lin Shan arrived first, because a running man moves fast. He'd bolted from the widow's house with nothing, straight into the streets I owned, and my people brought him in without much trouble. I stepped out, and when he tried to bolt again, I put a hand on him, just my hand, warm with the fire I now carried, and that was the end of his running. He stood there in front of me, the man who'd frozen my legs to the ground and stabbed out my first life, and he didn't recognize me. Not at first. That was the strangest part. 10 years, and he looked at my face and saw a stranger, because the last time he saw it, it belonged to a dog he was throwing away. Chen Jing came second, and she came worse. Zheng Ji's gang had finally caught her at the one game she couldn't stop playing, and by the time Grand Elder Lao put his fist through Zheng Ji's steel door and pulled her out of there, they'd already made their point. I'm not going to walk you through what a gang like that does to a woman they've decided to make an example of. It's enough to say she was in no shape to keep up the sweet voice anymore, and that elder brought her to me the way you carry something you've decided isn't your problem to finish. So there they were, both of them, at last, in my house. I let them see the whole of it before I let them see the end, because the seeing was the point. I sat where they could take it all in, the warm, bright hall, the 8 women around me, and I had each of them introduced by name and by rank, one after another, my wives, my household, the life I'd built out of the exact moment these two had ended. Sule first, of course. The girl Lin Shan had strung along for 6 months and cheated on with the woman now kneeling beside him. She called me husband, and I watched it land on him like a second knife. Then I told them, all of it, this time with my real face on, that the dog they'd murdered for a warm apartment had woken up 40 minutes before the world ended and spent every day since building the thing they were currently kneeling in front of. That the empty apartment, the phone calls, the fake robberies, the slow starvation, the whole 2 weeks of their unraveling, me, that I'd watched every lie through cameras they never found, that harmony brings wealth, the only food in a dying city, had been me the entire time they begged it for scraps. They did what people do, they groveled. And then, because they were who they were down to the very bottom, they turned on each other. Chen Jing blaming Lin Shan blaming Chen Jing, 2 people who destroyed a man together, spending their last dignity trying to sell the other one out to him first. It would have been sad if I had any sadness left for them. I'd spent it all a lifetime ago, on a couch, with a knife in my gut and her voice in my ear telling me to be a good boy and die. I didn't kill them. I gave them to each other, which was always going to be so much worse. I had them thrown out into the snow, together, the 2 of them, alone in the cold they'd sentenced me to, with nothing between them and the dark but each other. And I want to be clear about what the snow is in this world, because it matters. The snow is poison. Drink it, swallow it, let it into you, and it kills. Everyone in the city knew it by now. They knew it. I don't know exactly which one started it. I've thought about it, and I've decided I don't need to know. Cornered, freezing, each certain the other was about to do it first. One of them reached for the poisoned snow and forced it on the other, and the other did the same, and out there in the dark, at the very end, the last thing Chen Jing and Lin Shan ever did was make sure they didn't go alone. By morning, the snow had them both. The adulterous couple, who'd told me to die as a ghost story, had written the ending themselves. I stood at the window a long time before it was over. I didn't gloat. There wasn't a joke in me for it. This wasn't a face slap or a clever revenge or a good day at the market. This was the actual wound this whole second life had grown out of, finally closing, and it turned out closing a wound that deep doesn't feel like triumph, it just feels quiet. I'd promised myself on that couch that I'd never be their dog again, that I'd take everything, that this time I'd win. I'd kept all 3 promises. I watched the snow take the last 2 people I'd needed to become someone who could, and then I went back inside to the warm hall and the people who were actually mine, and I let the door close on the coldest part of me for good. I thought that was the end of the hardest night of my second life. The oldest wound closed, the last 2 ghosts gone into the snow, the warm hall waiting. I let myself believe it for about an hour. Then something came for the bodies. The Heaven and Earth Society rode into my night on the backs of the dead, and I finally saw the thing I'd only heard described. They came for the bodies in the snow, and not just Chen Jing and Lin Shan's. There were others out there from the day's work, and the memory eaters wanted them all. Their scientists rode reanimated corpses like mounts, leading them on cords like dogs, robed figures out of a nightmare that had gotten a research budget. The zombie that had been Xia Guang was among them, still hungry, and it did the thing to Lin Shan's body in the snow that I will not describe, except to say that whatever was left of the man who killed me stopped being anything at all. A robed scientist scooped up the other corpses into a tiny ring on his finger. A space ring, I realized, the same impossible tech as everything else that didn't make sense, and I watched him reanimate one of them into a shuffling beast on a leash in about the time it takes to boil rice. Grand Elder Lao met the Xiaguang thing head on. and behind it came a higher-ranking robe, an elder they called Zhao, and when the hood came back, I understood the knight had one more knife in it because Elder Wen, my saint doctor, was standing in the doorway, and she knew that face. It was her husband, the lab researcher everyone assumed was dead, Chen Peng. He wasn't dead. He was one of them, a necromancer in a cult that turned corpses into hunger. And the reason he'd surfaced tonight, the thing he screamed at her across the snow, was that he'd come to make his own wife into one of his eternal obedient dead. I watched something break in Elder Wen that no wound of mine had ever reached. The world had one more way to be cruel than I'd accounted for. Then I found out that whatever these things were, fire is still the oldest answer to the dark, because it turned out the undead had one profound weakness, and I happened to be it. My Samadhi flame, my Ziwei starfire, the reanimated didn't resist it the way a living power did. They caught the robed scientist with the space ring, the leashed things, the corpse that had been Xiaoguang. I put them all to the fire, and they went to ash, clean, the broken machines inside them cooking out of existence. Qianpeng himself fled. His mount was fast, faster than Rendong could close on in the dark, and I let the coward run because I had what he'd dropped. I looted the dead scientist's space ring, a little pocket dimension called Dijiang, 3 cubic meters of stolen physics off a burned hand. And that ring closed a loop I hadn't even known was open. Its keyhole matched the strange key I'd pulled weeks ago out of a safe deposit box labeled with Gao Ting's name, my little sister-in-law's name, on a bank box, holding the key to a piece of impossible space tech carried by memory-eating necromancers. The thread ran back to Gao Ting's graduate advisor, a space physics researcher named Wu Fan, and his lab near Jiangcheng University, which meant the fruits, the space rings, the whole substrate of the new impossible world had a source, and the source had an address. I filed it hard. Snow, superpowers, reanimated dead, a cabal of scientists, a key in a girl's name, and somewhere under it all a physics that let men carry warehouses and dimensions in their pockets. I'd thought I was fighting for a city. I was starting to understand I'd been handed a corner of something the size of the sky. Elder Wen didn't speak for a long time after. When she finally did, it was to ask if she could stay, really stay, all the way, no more 1 foot out the door. Her husband was a monster wearing a dead man's face, her old life was ash, and the only warm place left in the world was the one I'd built. I said yes. Some people come to you because you win them. Elder Wen came to me because the world burned down everything else, and I was the last fire still worth standing near. With the household sealed and the dead burned off, I went back to finishing the Song family, and I did it the slow way, the way that breaks a man before it kills him. Liu Kai was already half a ghost story to himself. The empty granary, the vanished fortune, the uncle he'd killed with his own men's guns, so I kept feeding the story. Every time he sent a team out, to raid, to buy, to scrape together anything, Rendong and Dabin were waiting for them. Snipers on the roofs, landmines under the snow, ambushes at Imperial Garden and Kaichi Garden, whole squads of songmen swallowed by the dark and never heard from again. From inside Liu Kai's collapsing mind, it didn't look like an enemy. It looked like his own people were deserting him, walking out into the snow and simply not coming back, one after another, until a warlord who'd had an army was sitting alone with his freezing elders wondering who was left to trust. And I sharpened the knife with a traitor. And Yue had a cousin, Chao Min, a grasping thing who'd sold the whole Lin family out to Liu Kai for a seat at his table. So Rendong intercepted the Song Lin convoy, wiped the Songmen, and then played the loyal Song rescuer to Cao Min's face, conning the traitor into walking straight into our hands believing she was being saved. And Yue watched her treacherous relatives get gathered up for judgment with a face carved out of ice. She'd asked to stay apart until the Song fell. The Song was falling. She was getting ready. Then I took the Song family apart, and I let the widow they'd wronged deliver the last of it herself. The end came fast once it came. I drained what was left of the Song Bank fortune the way I drain everyone, forced selling them their own survival at 10 times the price until the vault was empty. And then, on the final night, I walked into the Song stronghold with the sleep incense and put the household down soft, 1 room at a time. The guilty ones. The men who'd built their comfort on Wu Mei's murdered husband. The enablers. The ones with blood on them. The children and the servants I had gathered up and sent out into the care of people who'd keep them. Whatever the Song adults had earned, that debt didn't run down to the small ones, and I don't build my house on that kind of foundation. Some lines I won't cross even to be thorough. Especially to be thorough, but the guilty I gave to Wu Mei, because this was hers. She walked through that house with a blade and a stillness that would have frightened me if I hadn't understood exactly where it came from. A woman who'd given up a fortune to escape these people, who'd been terrified of them across a wall for 2 weeks, who'd learned over my dinner table that they'd murdered the man she loved and called it an accident. She didn't hesitate and she didn't gloat. She just finished it, the way you finish a thing that has hunted you your whole adult life. And Yue stood with her, and the two of them settled the Lin traders too. Grief has a long memory and a steady hand, and I'd given both of them somewhere to put it. And Liu Kai himself, the head of the snake, the future emperor of the north, the man who'd started this whole knot of murder, I took alive, shot the gun out of his hand and left him kneeling in the ruin of his own family, and let him look up into the faces of the two women whose fathers and husbands he'd taken. He confessed all of it, there at the end. The murder of his brother, Wang Peng's hand in it, the whole rotten architecture of his rise. And then he learned that his entire family was gone, and that the ghost that had haunted him for days had been a man the whole time, a man he'd never once seen coming. That was the last thing I wanted him to understand before the end. Not fire, not a bullet, just the knowledge that he'd been beaten completely by someone he'd never even known was in the room. Before the end, I mailed one video, and it handed me the biggest secret of the whole apocalypse for free. Here's a detail I'd been saving. Somewhere in the Song family's fall, I'd learned that Wang Peng, the officer who murdered Liu Kai's brother, who tipped him the granary, who started this whole chain over a wall at the military camp, had a beautiful wife named Chen Ji, and in the tangle of the Song's last days, Liu Kai had taken her to his bed for protection, and filmed it, because men like him film everything. So I took that video, and I sent it to Wang Peng. The reply I got back wasn't a reply, it was a location and a sound. Because Wang Peng wasn't sitting safe in some rear command post, Wang Peng was at the coast, at Penglai. And the audio that came back before his people cut the line was gunfire, heavy gunfire, and under it a deeper sound. Missiles, artillery, the noise of a military throwing everything it had at something in the sea. He'd broken Calm's discipline and gotten himself restrained for it, and in the chaos, I finally heard the shape of the thing the whole country had been deleting from the news. The coast. The frozen sea. That's where the army really went, and that's what it's really fighting. Not looters, not each other. Something came out of the ocean when the world froze, mutated, enormous, wrong, and it's been trying to come ashore ever since, and the entire species preservation plan, the shelter, the 95%, all of it, was the human race quietly conceding the coastline and digging in to survive whatever's swimming toward it. The snow was never the disaster. The snow was the thing that woke the disaster up. And that colossal ancient eye I'd seen in the fire, the one that told me to die, I couldn't prove it yet, but every instinct I had said it, and the sea were the same story, told from two different ends. Then Wu Mei and An Yue finished Liu Kai, and I let them have the silence. I didn't do it. It wasn't mine to do. Liu Kai's crimes belonged to the two women standing over him, the widow of the brother he'd murdered, the daughter of the family he'd butchered for their snowmobiles, and I stepped back and let them close it. It was quick, and it was final, and there was no speech and no fire, just two people settling the oldest debt a person can be owed, and then it was over. The future emperor of the North ended kneeling in the ruins of everything he'd built on other people's graves, and the North went right on being cold and empty and mine. Wu Mei didn't cry. She'd done her crying a long time ago, across a wall, in the dark, when she thought a Song assassin lived next door and no rescue was ever coming. When it was done, she just came and stood next to me and breathed, and I let her, and neither of us said the obvious thing, that the terrified widow who'd handed a stranger her umbrella on the first day of the end of the world had just outlived the entire family that ruined her. Some victories you don't narrate, you just stand in them together until they feel real. And then, right on the schedule I'd carried in my head for a lifetime, the plants began to bloom, and the whole world changed shape again. It started small, a mutant animal here, a thing that shouldn't move moving there. At the university, I burned a half-mutated cat that had eaten a spider plant leaf and started hunting people, and when it died, it left behind a bead of golden liquid that the machine drank down as pure experience, half a level of fire, just like that. A new rule revealed: kill a mutant, kill a power, and you take the golden core of what it was and grow. The strong were about to start eating the strong, and I just learned I had the biggest appetite in the city. In the same breath, I pulled a university lecturer named Tang Min out of the hands of a man who meant to do the worst thing to her, and she joined the household, the 8th, and woke up to a power nobody else had. She could tame the mutants, bind the monsters. She took 2 cat cores and turned the huge mutant that had been terrorizing the campus into a guard beast that followed her like a kitten. My house didn't just have a thunder god and a wall walker and a woman who saw through walls anymore. It was about to have a menagerie, because the real event was this. On the plants we'd been hoarding by the thousands, every houseplant in the city, dragged into my basements and my passages and Wujin's castle greenhouse, the first ability fruits were sprouting. Not 1, not 10. Hundreds of them, ripening all at once in the hands of the one man who'd spent 2 weeks buying up every leaf in Jiangcheng for exactly this morning. Everyone else in this city was about to fight and die over a handful of fruits. I was about to harvest an orchard of them and turn a household and an army into something the apocalypse had never seen. Not one man with a cheat, but a whole faction of powers, loyal, armed, and fed by a magic box that only ever got hungrier. I'd wanted to stop being at anyone's mercy. Turns out the only way to do that in a world like this one is to become the thing everyone else is at the mercy of. So that's what I did. The Memory Eaters came back for a rematch, and this time they brought a horde, and they were still bringing knives to a bonfire. The Heaven and Earth Society had learned to herd the slow shambling dead in numbers now, and they threw a whole crowd of them at an apartment door across the city, demanding, of all things, a key, a space key. They were hunting the same impossible physics I'd looted off the burned scientist, and they'd tracked it to a specific address, and they'd come with an army of corpses to collect it. Qian Peng, Elder Wen's monster of a husband, was somewhere in the back of it, having sent a decoy ahead like the coward he was. I burned the horde. That's the short version, and it's also the whole version. Fire is the answer to the reanimated dead, the way water is the answer to a fire, and I had more fire than anyone alive. The shambling crowd went up, and the robes scattered, and the door they'd been besieging stayed shut, and then it opened, and I met the man they'd wanted, Wu Fan. Gao Ting's old graduate advisor, the space physicist whose name had been threaded through this whole mystery, and he'd been hiding in the apartment directly across the hall the entire time, sitting on a hoard of the strange space metal, with 2 terrified PhD students and a story that finally connected the dots. He defected from the Heaven and Earth Society when it turned to necromancy. The society had split into a faction that put chips in corpses and a faction that chased immortality through drugs, and Wu Fan had wanted no part of either. And the source of it all, the space rings, the key, the very first ability fruits, was a strange metal the society had pulled out of the sea, the ocean again. Everything came back to the ocean. He'd hidden the key under Gao Ting's name to keep it off the society's books, never knowing I'd already lifted it from the bank. I gave him back his ring and his key, put a roof over him and his students, and added a physicist to a household that already had a thunder god and a beast tamer. My court was getting strange, and I liked it stranger. Tang Min tamed a 7-meter tiger, and my base turned into a fortress with teeth, literally. The mutations were accelerating, plants bleeding their half-formed power into any animal that ate them, and animals turning into things out of a bestiary. At one residential complex, a tiger that had escaped a zoo and gorged on mutated greenery had grown to 7 meters and awakened wind, and it was hunting the residents like a cat in a nest of mice. My fire alone couldn't finish it. The thing was too big, too fast, so I put a homing missile into it, because I am nothing if not willing to escalate, and once it was down, Tang Min took 2 more cores, leveled her own power up, and tamed the tigress on the spot. The comedy of it was that my first tamed beast, the big campus mutant, was now terrified of the new tigress wife, and the 2 of them established a household pecking order that mirrored the one inside the villa with distressing accuracy. Between the tiger and the cats and Wu Fan's space metal, the base became something genuinely formidable. 6 villas and the castle safe house and an underground passage, all packed with thousands of houseplants under guard, mined, alarmed, and patrolled by monsters that answered to my 8th wife. The old me, the soft novelist who froze to death in a tent, would not have recognized the fortress or the man running it. Balance north of 4 billion, machine climbing toward level 20, a menagerie, an armory, an orchard, and a court, and the loose end named Chen Ji, Wang Peng's wife, the one whose video I'd used to pry the sea monster secret loose, I closed cleanly. I delivered her back to her own brother, who tried to avenge his nephew and seize my women for it, and learned very fast what happens to a man who reaches for something guarded by a 7-meter tiger. He didn't reach twice. Every thread from the old world was getting tied off one after another, so that when the new world came for me in earnest, I wouldn't have a single frayed end for it to pull. Then the harvest came in, and I stopped being a man with a cheat and became a man with an army of them, nearly 1,000 ability fruits. That's what 2 weeks of buying up every houseplant in Jiangcheng bought me, while the rest of the city fought and bled and died over the handful of fruits that happened to sprout in the open. I walked my orchard and filled baskets. I ate my own way up first, of course. The machine only ever wants more, and I fed it fruit until my fire climbed to a new tier, a deeper, hotter thing than the starfire that had killed Wu Zhen. But the real moment, the one I'd been building towards since the day I woke up on that couch, was handing the rest out. I gathered my people, and I made them gods. Han Bo, my strategist, the man who took a dozen knives shielding a door for me, woke up to poison, a killer's power for a killer's mind. Grand Elder Lao, already my ace, ate his way to something close to unbreakable. You could throw a car at the man now. Rendong's wind sharpened past mere speed into something like teleportation, a blink that crossed rooms. He Chun's lightning deepened until he was the thunderstorm I'd recruited him to be. Even Zhang Lei, my quiet defector down in the south, got a spy's dream. He could simply stop being seen. And I didn't stop at the soldiers. My court got its claws too. He Hua, my actress, woke to shapeshifting, which suited her down to the ground. Chen Yu got charm, a power she'd honestly been running on manually her whole career. Elder Wen, my saint, my doctor, woke to healing, real healing, the power to pull people back from the edge she'd spent her whole life fighting for with just her hands. Wu Mei awakened a barrier, a shield she could throw over the whole villa, the widow who'd had no walls of her own now able to wall the world out for everyone she loved, and An Yue, quiet, grieving An Yue, who'd asked to keep to herself until the Song family fell. I saved a particular fruit for her, and I watched her wake up to ice. Ice. The exact power Lin Shan awakened in my first life. The power he used to freeze my legs to the ground before he put a knife in me. In my first life, ice was the thing that killed me. In this one, I put it in the hands of a woman the Song family had tried to break, and it became a thing that protected my house. I don't know if the universe was listening, but if it was, I wanted it on the record. The weapon that ended me the first time now answers to my family. Full circle. The wheel came all the way around, and this time I was the one turning it. The only person left who didn't want a power was the last ordinary human in my house, and she woke up to the strangest gift of all. Gao Ting, little sister, pigtails, the one who'd hidden in the back of my SUV to catch a spy on day one, and had been orbiting the household ever since, refusing on principle to be impressed by any of it. She was the last human in a house full of powers, and she sulked about it magnificently. So I gave her a fruit too, and she awakened, cooking. Yes, cooking. She got up from the fruit able to make food, which in a house with a vending machine that could conjure Australian lobster on demand sounds like the universe's idea of a practical joke, and she took it exactly that hard. Right up until we discovered what her food actually did. Because a meal cooked by Gao Ting didn't just fill a stomach, it refilled a power. A superhuman who'd burned themselves empty, Elder after moving a mountain, Rendong after 100 blinks, me after a night on fire, could eat one of her dishes and be topped back up, restored, ready to go again. In a world where the ceiling on every fight was how long your power lasted, my bratty little sister-in-law had woken up as a fountain that raised the ceiling for everyone. The useless one turned out to be the most strategically valuable person at the table, and I have never enjoyed being wrong about someone more. She stopped sulking. She started very quietly to belong. By the time the last fruit was handed out, the household wasn't a household anymore. It was a faction, a poison strategist, an unbreakable ace, a blinking assassin, a thunder god, a shapeshifter, a healer, a barrier, a beast tamer, a woman who saw through walls, a woman who walked through them, a lightning of ice, and a kitchen that resurrected the lot of them, all fed by a magic box that only ever got hungrier, all loyal to a man who 2 weeks ago had 2,000 yuan thrown at his feet like scraps. I thought that would be the crown on it, an army of gods, a fortress, a court, the whole city bending my way. I should have known the world wouldn't let me have a clean coronation because the memory eaters had stopped waiting for corpses. The Heaven and Earth Society changed the game, and they changed it by handing out my own miracle to monsters. I found out when I went to save a face from my past. Zhou Lan, the girl I'd carried a quiet torch for in school, the white moonlight I'd never had the nerve to speak to, married now to a broken property manager, had fallen into Zheng Ji's hands, and Zheng Ji's gang wasn't the pack of starving thugs I'd left them. They'd been armed, not with guns, with power. The society had started feeding ability fruits to street gangs, to Zheng Ji himself, to his henchmen, strength and fire and wind handed out to the worst men in the city like party favors, and they'd sweetened the deal with a leash, a false tooth full of cyanide, so that any of their new pet powers who got captured died before they could talk. I burned them. My new fire, hotter than the star flame, wrapped now in a kind of armor that shrugged off bullets and shrugged off Zheng Ji's borrowed strength, went through them like they were made of paper, and I pulled Zhou Lan out of it and sent her home to a life I didn't intend to intrude on. Some torches you carry your whole life precisely by never lighting them. But when I tried to make one of the henchmen talk, he bit down on his own tooth and was gone before he finished a sentence. That's when I understood the shape of the new enemy. The society wasn't a rumor in the South anymore. It was arming the city against me, cell by cell, with suicide built in, and my fortress full of women and fruit had just become the biggest target in Zhongcheng. So I did what I do. I moved first. I swept the fractured east, the last warlord squabbling over the corpse of the Donglin group, an earth user named Zhenghua, and his handful of powers holed up in a stronghold, and I went to take it myself, to pull the whole east city under one roof before the society could turn it against me. My 5 strange fires went through Zhenhua's power users like a hot wire through wax. It should have been another clean win. And then a man I'd never seen strolled into the middle of my victory, collecting watches off the dead, and told me he'd been looking forward to meeting my fire. His name was Han Ming, and he was the first thing in this second life that genuinely scared me. He was a special envoy of the Heaven and Earth Society, and his power was the worst one I'd ever heard described because his power was mine, all of them. Han Ming could take a golden core out of a dead superhuman, take the meat of what made them special, and copy it, wear their power himself, at something like 85% strength, 1 stolen ability per type. He already carried light and dark and a mental power and water, a walking museum of other people's gifts, each one cut out of a corpse. He didn't fight for territory or food or revenge. He fought to collect. And he looked at my fire, the 10 strange flames I'd bled and clawed and killed to gather, with the exact warm patience of a man eyeing the last piece he needs for a set. "I'll keep my fire slot open," he told me, pleasant as anything. "For you." We fought, and it was the first fight since Wuzhen where I wasn't sure of the ending. His stolen powers layered over each other, light to blind, dark to flee, water to smother my flame, and only my little sister-in-law's power-restoring cooking in my belly let me outlast the exchange. And even then he didn't fall. He used the dark he'd stolen off some dead man and simply left, unhurried, promising to see me again. A nemesis who doesn't want my city, or my women, or my life. A nemesis who wants the one thing I can never stop being. A man who gets stronger every single time the world grows a new power for him to harvest. Han Ming leaving alive taught me something I needed though, and I paid for the lesson by chasing everything he'd let slip. The Heaven and Earth Society, it turned out, wasn't a cabal. It was a kingdom, and it was tearing itself apart. 3 special envoys ran its arms, Han Ming and his stolen powers, a man who ran the chip and corpse side, and a third who worked directly under the Grand Master on something they called the human gene lock, some deeper research into what a person could be unlocked into, and they were at each other's throats. Han Ming's whole game, I realized, wasn't just collecting powers for their own sake. He meant to copy the strongest abilities in the region, mine among them, and then use the stolen set to kill his own leadership and take the society whole. I'd walked into a fight with one envoy and backed out understanding I'd stumbled into the succession war of a doomsday cult. So I did the same thing, which was to get bigger faster. I finished the east, Zhenghua's stronghold fell, the last Donglin warlords folded, and the whole east city came under one banner, the Harmony Brings Wealth Gang, 10,000 men and a squad of superhumans and a strategist counting every yuan of it. I'd bought a leash for the dangerous ones too, a nasty little system pill that bound a captured power to me body and soul so that every enemy officer I broke became a loyal one, an army that grew every time it won. And then, from the people I'd enslaved and the secrets I'd pried loose, I heard the name that finally showed me the ceiling of this whole thing, and it wasn't the monster in the fire, and it wasn't the sea, and it wasn't even the cult. It was a man. In Beijing, they called him Scythe. The strongest esper in the country, they said. A recluse in seclusion since he'd reached across thousands of miles and killed the giant thing leading the sea monsters off another city's coast, killed it from a continent away, with a thought, no backlash, no strain. They said he could lock onto a man anywhere in the country and end him regardless of distance, regardless of walls, regardless even of a space power's pocket dimension. They said the whole capital's power struggle was really just everyone waiting to see which side Scythe would take when he opened his eyes. I sat with that a long time. Because for 2 weeks, I'd been the biggest fish in every pond I swam into, and I'd just found out there was an ocean, and in the ocean there was a man who could kill me without getting out of his chair. Good. I work better with something to climb toward. Before any of that, though, I finally went and saw the place they'd built to save the human race, and it cured me of any last sympathy for the people running the end of the world. The shelter. I'd been hearing about it since the military camp, the caste carved into the mountain, the 95% written off, the seed saved while the field burned. Ma Lin, my brother, my first real ally, had been evacuated there weeks ago with a promise that he'd bring me too. So I went to find him, and I went the quiet way, the way I go everywhere now, with Sule's radar painting the mountain in my head and a fistful of system tricks to keep me off the maps. What I found under Bama Mountain wasn't an arc, it was a pyramid, and it was rotten from the base up. 10,000 people stacked in 7 underground floors and sorted into 4 castes, and the sorting was exactly what you'd expect from men who'd already decided most of the species was acceptable losses. A handful of tycoons at the top with their comforts intact, a ring of scientists and elite below them, a wall of guards, and at the bottom, 9,000 laborers doing the work and eating. I want you to sit with this the way I had to. Processed cakes pressed out of the giant mutant insects the shelter farmed in the dark. That was the deal the old world's rulers cut for the people who built their sanctuary. dig and serve and eat the bugs and be grateful you're not in the snow. And in the worst corners of the lowest floor, I gathered laborer and test subject were the same word. I found Ma Lin down there, my brother, the rich second-generation kid who'd bought 20 million in supplies from me with a laugh and called me his brother over drinks. Demoted to farming in a greenhouse, worked like the rest, his father's Beijing money worth nothing behind those blast doors. So I took him back, walked him straight out through walls the shelter thought were solid, past the psychic girl they used as an alarm, and put him back among people who'd treat him like a person. Cost me nothing but the effort, and it was the easiest good deed I'd done in 2 lifetimes. He wept a little, once we were clear. I let him. Then I fed him a fruit, and he woke up able to grow food out of dead ground, which, in a world that had traded its farmland for a bug farm, turned out to be worth more than his father's whole fortune. But the shelter left me one gift on the way out, a splinter I couldn't stop worrying at. Deep in the leadership's own nervous chatter, I overheard it. On the night the world froze, the rainstorm night, before a single ability fruit existed anywhere, a supermarket's entire 2,000-ton central warehouse had been emptied, vacuumed clean, gone, in an instant by a power that shouldn't have existed yet. And it wasn't me, and it wasn't dead Wu Zhen, which meant there was a third one. A third person who'd woken up on that same afternoon knowing the ending, carrying a space power like Wu Zhen's, still out there somewhere, playing a game I couldn't see. I'd thought killing Wu Zhen made me the last man standing who'd read the future. It didn't. It just took one competitor off a board I was only now realizing had more players than I could count. I went home after that, and I want to end on home, because home is the whole reason for the rest of it. The castle was warm and loud and ridiculous. Gao Ting was in the kitchen turning out dishes that put the strength back in a tired god, complaining the whole time that her world-changing power came with dishes to wash. Grand Elder Lao sat with Li Qian in a corner, the old soldier gone soft-eyed and awkward as a boy, and I made a point of not looking too long because a man's allowed to keep the one gentle thing he found at the end of the world. Elder Wen had stopped flinching, and Yue's ice frosted the windows when she laughed, which she'd started cautiously to do, and Sule, my first, my truest, the woman who'd handed a stranger every yuan she had on the 3rd day of the apocalypse and turned her back to prove she meant it. Sule ran all of it, the whole strange kingdom of powers and beasts and clever women, with the look on her face like she'd known all along it would come to this. I stood in the doorway a while and just watched them. The soft man I used to be died on a couch with a knife in his gut, and I don't miss him exactly. But every so often, in a warm room full of people who'd have frozen alone in the old timeline, I catch a glimpse of what he wanted. A home. Just a home. That was all he ever wanted. And I understand that the cold thing I became built the exact thing the warm thing died wishing for. Funny how that works. You have to stop being a good boy to keep everyone the good boy loved. There was one more piece of housekeeping, and it taught the whole city a rule about the family I'd built. Han Bo, my strategist, my poison, the man who bled for me on a basement floor, had an in-law problem. A grasping wife, a freeloading brother-in-law, parents-in-law who looked at the villa and the ability fruits and the warmth and decided they were owed a cut. They pushed hard enough to lay hands on his own mother over it. And Han Bo, who I'd handed a superhuman's power and a general's rank, handled it the way this family handles a knife pointed inward, coldly, completely, and without asking my permission. When it was done, there was no in-law problem anymore. And I did a thing that some people would call monstrous, and I call clear. I had the bodies strapped to snowmobiles and driven through the district in daylight, a moving billboard with a single message. This is what disloyalty costs, even by marriage, even by blood. Nobody in my territory misread it. Then I turned the same energy outward and went fishing for the whole region. We cut recruitment videos, slick ones. Harmony brings wealth as a promised land, warm and fed and safe, come one come all, verified funds only at the door, and pushed them across every channel still breathing, and Jiangqing became a magnet. The desperate, the rich, the powered, all of them turning toward the one city that seemed to have its act together at the end of the world. My balance rolled past numbers that used to be national budgets. The machine kept climbing, hungry as ever, and I kept feeding it, because I could feel the ceiling of this game getting higher every week, and I intended to reach it before anything reached me. And somewhere up in Beijing, behind the blast doors and the super rail and the 10 old families who really ran what was left of the country, people had started asking a question I'd been careful to keep them from asking for 2 weeks. Who is Harmony Brings Wealth? Where is he getting all of it? The food, the water, the fruit, the impossible endless supply. A no-name who'd taken a whole city while the army had its back turned to the sea. I'd spent 2 lifetimes being too small for anyone powerful to notice. Now the most powerful people left alive were learning my alias, and every instinct I built out of the first life told me that being noticed by the big fish is exactly how a small one ends up eaten. I needed to be bigger before that conversation reached me. I was running out of before. But that's the shape of the next war, and this one, the first one, the one that started on a couch with a knife and a woman's voice telling me to die. This one is finished. And then, on an ordinary night, the vending machine told me what it actually was, and everything I thought I understood about my second life turned out to be the small version of the truth. It started as a purchase. The machine's catalog had grown as it leveled, and one night a new category appeared in it that had no business being there among the noodles and the rifles. Cultivation manuals. Techniques. The kind of thing I used to invent for a living, back when I was a failed novelist writing fantasy nobody read. I bought one. A fire art, naturally, and the moment I did, the machine stopped being a machine. A voice answered, not the flat system voice I'd been hearing since the couch. A person. She called herself Yue Ling, and she'd been the thing inside my vending machine the whole time, waiting for me to climb high enough to hear her, and she told me the story I'd been living inside without knowing its shape. The machine wasn't a system, it was a construct, an intelligent tool built by a god, the god of fire, an exiled deity out of a place Yue Ling called the immortal realm, a being branded a demon and hunted for it, who had scattered his inheritance across the mortal world and bound it to a line of successors, one after another, fire-fated, each meant to carry the flame forward. I was the 11th, and the 10 strange fires I'd bled and killed and clawed my way into gathering, the Samadhi, the Ziwei, all of them, the flames I'd thought were just power-ups on a ladder, were the condensed blood essence of the 10 who came before me, 10 successors, all of them hunted down and killed by the immortal realm before they could finish the climb. Their fire lived in me now, their unfinished errand was mine. She told me the rest of it plainly, the way you tell a man something too big to soften. The espers of this new world were only the first rung. Above them was golden core, above that, nascent soul. The machine's whole 30-level climb was a cultivation ladder wearing a system's clothes, and every yuan I'd fed it had been buying me rungs towards something the immortal realm would have to take seriously. I'd thought I was leveling up a vending machine. I'd been climbing toward a war in heaven the whole time. The sea monsters, the cosmic eye that told me to die, the deleted news, the frozen sky. Yue Ling didn't have every answer, but she was certain of the direction they pointed. Up, out. Toward the realm that had murdered 10 of my predecessors and would murder me too, the moment it noticed the 11th had gotten this far. And she gave me the errand. Cultivate. Keep the heavenly fire art hidden from every eye. The cult, the shelter, Beijing, scythe, all of them. Climb to nascent soul. And someday, if I lived that long, find the god of fire and settle the debt the immortal realm had spent 11 lifetimes running up. I sat with that for a long, long time, because I'd thought I was a man who got a lucky cheat and used it to take a city. I found out I was the 11th heir to a murdered god's revenge, holding the fire of 10 dead men in my belly, standing at the very bottom of a ladder whose top was hidden in a realm that killed everyone who climbed. The apocalypse, the snow, the fruits, the sea, the whole ending of the world I'd been so proud of surviving twice. Yue Ling made me understand it was a door, and I'd just been handed the key and told what was on the other side, and told it would try to kill me the moment I opened it. Good. I've been climbing out of graves since the first one. Might as well climb all the way. And then the capital stopped just wondering about me and sent someone to knock. The super rail opened. An 800-meter deep tunnel built to run from Beijing to Jiangcheng in half an hour. The old world's last great machine, driven through the frozen earth while everyone above ground fought over noodles. The fact that they'd pointed it at my city first told me which faction up in Beijing was winning the argument, and that the argument now included me. And down that tunnel, on the first train, came my answer, an Esper captain and her squad, one of the trained elites who answered to the man they called Scythe, sent to test the no-name who'd swallowed a city, to measure me, to lean on me for supplies for the Coast War, and, if I didn't measure up the right way, to detain me. They called her Shadow Fox. Pink-haired, unbothered, radiating the specific calm of a person who has never once needed a second attempt. She'd come to see whether harmony brings wealth was a threat or a resource, and she'd come ready to make the determination permanent if she didn't like the answer. 2 weeks ago, that would have been the end of my story, a small man, noticed by the capital, quietly erased. But I wasn't a small man anymore. I was the 11th heir to a dead god's fire with a warehouse behind my eyes and a space power I could kill with, and I'd decided a long time ago, on a couch, that I would never again let anyone stronger than me decide whether I got to keep breathing. So when she opened with her instant kill, a lance of pink light that would have ended anyone in the city but me, I let it pass through the space where I'd been, stepped out of the fold in the world I'd learned to hide inside, and appeared behind her close enough to speak low in her ear, the way I'd once answered a phone to break a man. She froze. The capital's elite, the hand of Scythe himself, went perfectly still, because for the first time in a long time, something had gotten behind her guard. I've barely gotten started, I told her. And you already know I'm worth talking to. That's the moment I'll leave you on. Not because the story's over, it's barely begun. The coast hasn't shown its teeth. The god in the fire is still out there. Scythe hasn't opened his eyes, and a smiling man is still saving a space in his collection shaped like me, and a thing beyond the sky still knows my face. I didn't win the apocalypse, I just won the first, smallest fight inside it, the one that was actually about me, but I'll leave you there anyway, with my breath on the neck of the capital's blade, because of what it means. 2 weeks and a lifetime ago, someone stronger than me stood at my back and decided whether I got to keep breathing, and she decided I didn't, and she was right up until the exact moment the universe hit rewind. Now I'm the one standing at the strong one's back, close enough to whisper, and I'm the one who gets to decide how the conversation goes. Everything between those two moments, the empire, the fire, the army of gods, the 8 women who call me husband, the 10 dead men's flames in my belly, all of it was just me making very sure the second moment could never turn back into the first. So here's where I'll actually leave it. 2 weeks ago, I woke up on a couch with a knife-shaped memory in my gut and 40 minutes to live twice, and a woman's voice in my ear telling me to be a good boy and die. I wasn't a good boy. I didn't die. I took the 40 minutes and the memory of every mistake and a vending machine that got stronger the more recklessly I bet on the future, and I built a city, a fortune, a court, an army of gods, and a fire born from the stars. Every single person who wronged me in that first life is gone. The betrayers, into the snow they sentenced me to. The rival who read the same ending I did, into the collapse of his own hoarded world, the warlord who murdered my woman's husband, into the ruins of the family he built on graves. I promised myself dying, that I'd never be anyone's dog again, that I'd take everything, that this time I'd win. Look around, I kept every word, and it still isn't enough, and I already know it. The wound is closed, the bill is not paid. Turns out those are two different things, and I learned the difference the hard way, twice. Enough is a word for people who can't see what's coming. I can see all of it, because a thing the size of a nightmare looked up out of a dead man's collapsing pocket and learned my face. Because a science that turns corpses into hunger is spreading up from the south, and it pulled its first miracles out of the sea. Because past the frozen coast, the army is throwing missiles at something that came out of the ocean when the world froze, and losing. And because a smiling man who wears dead people's powers just told me he's saving a space in his collection, shaped exactly like me, the snow was never the disaster. The snow was the alarm clock. I spent 2 weeks getting strong enough to rule a city, right as I found out the city was never the game. But tonight I'm warm, I'm home, everyone who was supposed to kill me is dead, and I've got an army of gods, a magic box that never runs dry, and a kitchen that raises the dead man's ceiling on all of us. And here's the part the first version of me never got to learn. The first time around, I had nothing to lose, and I lost it anyway. This time, I have everything. A wife who bet her whole life on me on day 3. A widow who outlived the family that ruined her. An old soldier who found something gentle at the end of the world. A little sister who won't admit she belongs. A whole warm, loud house of people who'd have frozen alone in the timeline where I stayed soft. The monster beyond the sky, the cult, the sea, the smiling collector, the god's old debt. They can all get in line. Because the man they're coming for isn't the dog on the couch anymore, and he isn't fighting for himself anymore either. He's got a family now, and a fire that used to belong to 10 dead men, and absolutely nothing left to be afraid of. So ask me if that's enough. Then watch what I do when I decide it isn't.